Chapter 391. The Lady of Earth was now the Lord of Samsara and controlled the Chaos Treasure, the 6 paths of reincarnation. Even if she could not save the Magi, she could still protect the Magi in the Great Calamity. In the Netherworld, unless the 3 paths of heaven, earth and man personally took action, otherwise, the Lady of Earth would be an invincible existence. Therefore, the Netherworld would be the last pure land of the Magi. It was also the escape route that the Lady of Earth had prepared for the Magi. She hoped that the day when she used the Netherworld would never come. Fellow Taoist Lady of Earth, we have left the primordial world for some time. It's time for us to return to our birthplace to take a look. Let's part ways here. After sorting out his emotions, the great void Taoist bid farewell to the Lady of Earth. Then I won't send you off. Speaking of which, it's time for me to go back. The 6 paths of reincarnation had just been born and was still unstable. The Lady of Earth could not leave him for too long to prevent him from losing control and causing a disaster. After bidding farewell to everyone, he was about to return to the Netherworld to suppress the 6 paths of reincarnation. All right, we'll take our leave first. Just as the great void Taoist bid farewell to the Lady of Earth, a sudden change occurred in the depths of the Netherworld Blood Sea. A power that was not inferior to that of a saint erupted and swept over, causing everyone's expressions to change drastically. What happened? What a powerful power. It's not weaker than a saint. It's even stronger. For a moment, those who were about to leave, as well as those who had already left, stopped in their tracks and used their supernatural powers to look into the depths of the Netherworld Blood Sea. Even the Taoist Mingi looked over in surprise and bewilderment. Logically speaking, he should know best what was in the Blood Sea. However, he did not notice the birth of the 6 paths of reincarnation at all. Now, another power that was not inferior to a saint appeared. He did not know what was going on. Was he, the Lord of the Blood Sea, fake? He had been in the Blood Sea for so long. Why hadn't he discovered such a powerful treasure in the Blood Sea? At this moment, the Taoist Mingi could not help but doubt his identity. Even the joy of the benefits from the heavens had been diluted by a lot. These things were all treasures in the Blood Sea. Logically speaking, they should belong to him. Now, they were all taken by outsiders. In the end, he was still at a disadvantage. The more he thought, the angrier he became. Everyone looked over and saw that in the depths of the Nether Blood Sea, a vast world was slowly spreading out. In an instant, it covered the entire Blood Sea and continued to expand. However, this world was not expanding towards the untainted land. Instead, it was expanding underground. It could be seen that a large amount of 9 nether chi underground was being devoured by this world, becoming nutrients for its growth. The Netherworld realm had come into being. Just as everyone was talking, the Nether realm finally accumulated enough power to manifest itself from the Nether Blood Sea and completely appear in the untainted land. This was the world that corresponded to the Heaven realm. It belonged to the world of the dead. At this moment, it welcomed the opportunity to be born. Rumble. A violent tremor could be felt. The supposedly boundless Nether Blood Sea was completely swallowed up by the Nether realm, becoming a part of it and completely merging with it. At the same time, the ancestral grounds of the ghost Dao that Feng Zichen had paid an enormous price to establish, the Fengdu Azura Mountain, had also been devoured by the Netherworld and became a member of the Netherworld mountain range. However, Fengdu Azura Mountain was the ancestral grounds of the ghost Dao after all. With the blessing of the ghost Dao and the favor of the path of death, it was obviously different from other places. As soon as it fell into the Netherworld, it was connected to the ancestral veins of the Netherworld and became the head of the Netherworld mountain range. The origin expanded infinitely. In the blink of an eye, it became the top famous mountain. Its size increased countless times. It was as high as the sky of the Netherworld, and one could not see the end of it. Een Mountain. The first mountain of the Netherworld, the top grotto heaven of the untainted land, which was the current Fengdu Azura Mountain. As the saying went, at the foot of Een Mountain was where the underworld was located. From this, one could see the status of Een Mountain. The Netherworld had just appeared. Before Feng Zichen could make a move, this opportunity had come first. He was really fated to be with the Netherworld. Phew! The expansion of the Netherworld continued, and it was getting faster and faster. The 9 nether chi deep underground was decreasing at a speed visible to the naked eye, being devoured by the Netherworld. At the same time, all the grotto heavens and blessed lands in the untainted land suddenly shook. Then, an inexplicable force erupted, causing the innate origins of the grotto heavens and blessed lands to ignore the array restrictions set up by their masters. A wisp of it was forcefully separated and poured into the netherworld. This was great. Such a big thing had happened. The powerful beings who did not want to pay attention to the netherworld had no choice but to look at the netherworld to see what had happened. It had caused the grotto heavens and blessed lands to riot for no reason. The grotto heavens and blessed lands were not like cultivators. If they lost their innate origins, they could make up for it by cultivating hard for a period of time. They had to pay the price of releasing less innate chi. They had to accumulate for countless years before they could completely recover. If they did not want to wait for it to recover on its own, they could only use heavenly materials and earthly treasures. With this calculation, the powerful beings would suffer a huge loss. Of course, this alone was not enough to shock the powerful beings. What really attracted their attention was what was absorbing the origin of the grotto heavens and blessed lands and could completely set up their means. If they could not figure it out and came from time to time in the future, even the powerful beings with deep foundations would not be able to withstand such consumption. On the other side, after the netherworld devoured the innate origins of the grotto heavens and blessed lands, the changes became even more intense. The rules of heaven and earth interweaved and floated in the void. A realm wall was formed, isolating the inside and outside, separating the netherworld from the untainted land and forming a whole. Inside, the lands of creation were born. It was eerie, as if there was ghost chi flowing, death chi filling the air, or the aura of the nine nether. It was very magical. This was a special product of the netherworld. The innate origins of the grotto heavens and blessed lands had undergone a miraculous change after being transformed by the netherworld. With the characteristics of the netherworld as the foundation, it gave birth to the creation that belonged to the netherworld. It was the creation that belonged to the dead. It was different from the things of the living. It was abnormally mysterious and mysterious. The innate origins of these grotto heavens and blessed lands were the nutrients that heaven and earth had prepared for the birth of the netherworld. Therefore, he did not have the slightest obstruction when he fused. When he collected these powers, he did not encounter the slightest obstruction. Let's ask, no matter how strong those powerful beings were, how could they compare to heaven and earth? Heaven and earth wanted to collect the innate origins of the grotto heavens and blessed lands to help the netherworld be born. Even if their methods were 10 times stronger, it would be useless. They could not resist at all. When a person's strength was exhausted, the power of heaven and earth was vast and boundless. It could not be compared at all. This was the difference. The netherworld was originally a great world that corresponded to the heaven realm. It should have been born together, separated by life and death, and divided by yin and yang. However, because of reincarnation, the birth of the netherworld was delayed again and again. It was not until today that it welcomed the opportunity to be born. However, the timing of its birth was still too late. It missed the high-speed development period of the primordial world. As a result, the current it was far less powerful than the heaven realm. However, it was also because of this that in the great battle between the liches and demons in the future, the heaven realm was shattered, but the netherworld could be intact. This could be considered as a gain and a loss. There were 9 heavens in the sky. There was the 9 nether in that land, corresponding to it. When the heaven realm was born, it was supported by the starlight of Zhousing. When the netherworld was born, it was naturally supported by the grotto heavens and blessed lands of the primordial world. Only then would it be fair. What a dense aura of death. Is this the legendary death realm? The strange world born from the earth is different from the living. It completely belongs to the dead and corresponds to the heaven realm. In the eyes of everyone, a great world filled with the aura of death slowly spread out. Its aura was strange and demonic, and it was incomparably cold. It made people feel uncomfortable. Especially when the gates of hell, the 3 life stone, the karma mirror, the bridge of helplessness. These strange treasures that were unique to the netherworld appeared. It made the discomfort reach its peak. These great divine abilities were no longer the young boys when they first saw the heaven realm. They had already become giants, the peak of the primordial world. Their experience and knowledge had been greatly improved. When they saw the netherworld, they would no longer make a fuss as they did when they saw the heaven realm. They did not know its origin at all. At this moment, even if they did not know the name of the netherworld, they could still deduce its origin. Good boy! These connate spirit treasures are so magical. They actually involved the path of karma and the path of fate. Seeing the treasures of the netherworld, everyone felt their hearts tighten as if they were being stared at by something. It was extremely uncomfortable. Everyone understood that it was the power of karma and fate. Such power was the most terrifying and magical. It could ignore one's realm and defense and directly carry out a rule attack. It was impossible to guard against. Even with their current realm, if they were hit by these treasures of the netherworld for a moment, they would suffer a small loss. They would not be injured, but they would definitely lose their skin. As the netherworld continued to spread out, more mysteries appeared in front of everyone's eyes. At the same time, they could not help but exclaim in surprise. They could not help but have some enlightenment, and their realm actually improved slightly. There was great terror between life and death, but there was also great opportunity. Now that the death realm had appeared, everyone felt the Tao runes of death and corroborated with the Tao runes of life. They understood the principles of life and death, so it was normal for their cultivation to improve. Fellow Taoists, this world is called the Netherworld. It is a place enveloped by the path of death. It is a place of fortune like the heaven realm. It should have appeared together with the heaven realm to split yin and yang and determine life and death. However, it was affected by the cycle of reincarnation, and its birth was delayed again and again. It has only appeared today and appeared in the world. After a while, seeing that everyone had woken up from their enlightenment, Hutu introduced. She was also one of the rulers of the Netherworld. Naturally, everything about the Netherworld could not be hidden from her. I see. On the other side, the powerful beings who had rushed over because of the incident at the dojo could not help but reveal a look of realization when they heard this. They understood the reason. It turned out that the true master of the blessed grotto heaven had made a move. The huge rock in their hearts was also relieved. It was good that it was not an outsider who made a move. The blessed grotto heaven was said to be theirs, but it was actually the primordial world. This was its true master. They were just in charge. Since the original master had taken action to collect the origin, they naturally could not stop him. There is the heaven realm in the sky and the netherworld realm underground. One yin and one yang, life and death. This is in line with the principle of the cycle of yin and yang. In the early years, not long after the heaven realm had appeared, the poor Wei had suspected that there should be a world underground that corresponded to the heaven realm. For this reason, after the master's lecture, the poor Wei had gone deep into the primordial world to try her luck and see if she could find the netherworld realm. Unfortunately, she did not have enough luck. The poor Wei had searched underground for 1,000,000 years, but she still did not find any traces of the netherworld realm. She had no choice but to leave the primordial world and choose to live in seclusion. However, I did not expect that the world nurtured by this land would only appear today. Fate really makes fools of people. At this moment, an old man in a yellow robe suddenly sighed. He was Taoist Huang Ling, an innate earth spirit. He was a top-level innate god fiend. His cultivation was not weaker than the great void Taoist. He was also an expert in the great perfection of sage to be. His killing techniques were not strong, but his defense was the best in the primordial world and could be ranked in the top 3. Even if Tai attacked, he would not be able to break through his defense without using the Dong Huang Bell. As an innate earth spirit, he was most sensitive to the primordial world. When the heaven realm was born, he had vaguely sensed that there seemed to be a secret in the depths of the earth. Unfortunately, due to the cycle of reincarnation, the netherworld realm could not appear. Although Taoist Huang Ling sensed it, he could not find it. He was not the only one. In the primordial world, there were many people who could sense the existence of the netherworld realm or guess the existence of the netherworld realm. Those great divine masters who had attained their Tao with the Tao of Yin and the Tao of Earth all had some guesses about the netherworld realm. They had also gone underground to search. However, as expected, they did not find anything. The birth of the netherworld realm allowed the 3 realms to exist side by side. They played the cycle of life and death together. The primordial world became much more complete because of this. It's a good thing. Someone stood outside of time and space and looked at the primordial world with his Dharma eyes. He discovered that the primordial world now had the heaven realm above, the primordial world in the middle, and the netherworld realm below. The 3 realms were separated and each had their own duties. It was unusually complete. The heaven realm was like the Yang pole. The netherworld was like the Yin pole. The primordial world was a dividing line. It perfectly separated the heaven realm and the netherworld. From a macroscopic point of view, The primordial world was like a huge yin-yang taiji diagram. It floated in the chaos and was still rotating. As it rotated, the principles of yin and yang were deduced. It emitted a huge suction force and sucked in all the surrounding chaos energy. It refined it into the purest source of heaven and earth to strengthen the primordial world. Yin-yang taiji diagram of heaven and earth. At this moment, the primordial world was even more perfect than before. The speed at which it absorbed power from the chaos outside was also faster than before. If the chaos outside was compared to heaven and earth, then the primordial world would be the cultivators who lived in this world. As the three realms were perfected, the primordial world's cultivation level improved. The speed at which it absorbed power from heaven and earth naturally became faster. Believe it, if the three realms rotated, if it could be maintained, as time passed, the primordial world source would become more and more vigorous, and the rules would become more and more perfect. It would continue to advance until it became an eternal and indestructible world. Chapter 392. However, cultivators had tribulations, and so did the world. Moreover, the tribulation was even greater than that of cultivators. The slightest carelessness would lead to destruction. Perhaps before the primordial world could advance to an eternal world, the immeasurable tribulation would erupt and drag the entire primordial world into the ruins, causing everything to return to chaos. The immeasurable tribulation was the most terrifying tribulation. It was the tribulation that destroyed the world. Its appearance signaled the end of the world. Every world that was born from the chaos had its fate preordained long ago. It was bound to be destroyed. It was born in the chaos and returned to the chaos. This was reincarnation, and also fate. Other than the eternal world, no world could escape. And these were all tribulations that one had to go through on the path of cultivation. As long as one did not attain the great Tao and prove eternity, they had to go through it. There was no avoiding it. Even someone as strong as Pangu had a tribulation, let alone others. Only after the primordial world advanced to an eternal world could one escape the tribulation of heaven and earth. Therefore, if the primordial world wanted to break free from the fate of destruction, it could only continue to advance so that the immeasurable tribulation could not catch up with its advancement and would be left behind forever. And the advancement of the primordial world was not enough to rely on the world itself. At this time, it needed the help of the saints and the great divine powers. Let them use their own Tao and Dharma to verify with the primordial world, so as to perfect the rules of heaven and earth and make the world more perfect. This was also the meaning of the existence of saints and great divine powers. To find the flaws of heaven and earth and make up for them. Otherwise, why were there so many great divine powers in heaven and earth? They were all the vermin of heaven and earth. If not for the fact that the evolution of heaven and earth needed them, the heavenly Tao would be willing to let them exist. One had to know. The birth of every great divine power represented that he had made a great contribution to heaven and earth, perfecting the rules of the primordial world, and making a great contribution to heaven and earth. Otherwise, he would not have become a great divine power. The prerequisite for Daluo Jingxian to advance to a quasi-saint was to make a contribution to heaven and earth. If not, no matter how strong he was, Daluo Jingxian would be the end. It would be impossible for him to take another step forward. Even with such harsh conditions, the number of great divine powers and quasi-saints in the primordial world was still not small. From this, one could deduce what the primordial world was like back then. There must be loopholes everywhere. The great mystical abilities had contributed greatly to the prosperity of the primordial world. Therefore, they were able to stand high above and enjoy the worship of all living beings. To the primordial world, great mystical abilities were a double-edged sword. If used well, it would benefit the world. If he didn't use it well, he would hurt himself as well as others. After that, during the Great Lich Demon War, he just didn't use a good example. It directly shattered the primordial world into pieces. Even the advantage that he had accumulated with great difficulty was completely destroyed. The primordial world had suffered heavy losses. The current primordial world is not too perfect. If from now on, the demon lords will rule the heaven realm, and the sorcerer race will rule the netherworld. Those who become golden immortals will ascend to the heavenly realm and be under the jurisdiction of the heavenly court. The soul of the deceased has entered the nether realm and is under the jurisdiction of the shaman race. Those below the golden immortal realm reside in the wilderness. In this way, the three realms will be in balance, life and death will be in order, and the primordial world will be completely stabilized. The disturbance of eternity. Looking at the primordial three realms, everyone spoke one after another, imagining a beautiful future of the primordial world. To be honest, what the great void Taoist and the others thought was completely feasible in theory. In the later generations, the process of the primordial world was roughly like this. The only difference was that the person who ruled the world had changed. However, theory was theory, practice was practice. The situation of the primordial world had already reached the point where the shaman and demon race had to fight. It was completely impossible for them to coexist peacefully and control the two realms respectively. Moreover, even if they wanted to, the heavenly Tao would not agree. Therefore, although the thoughts of these great mystical abilities were good, they were a little ahead of their time. Just as everyone wanted to continue discussing, a will appeared in the dark. It was incomparably vast, casting a shadow over their hearts. That was the heavenly Tao. Their words involved too much. The heavenly Tao did not want them to continue talking, so it sent down a will to warn everyone. Sigh. It's very boring. Since the heavenly Tao had appeared, everyone naturally could not continue talking. They could only sigh helplessly and continue to observe the evolution of the nether realm. From ancient times until now, anyone who went against the heavenly Tao had died. In the blink of an eye, 100 years passed in a hurry. The evolution of the nether realm was finally completed. The original location of the nether blood sea was completely replaced by a pitch-black world. That was the nether realm. It did not look big, only the same size as the original nether blood sea. However, in reality, its area was far beyond everyone's imagination. It was comparable to the largest world in the primordial world, the heaven realm. Compared to it, the nether blood sea, which was known to be boundless, was still a little small. Therefore, after the nether realm appeared, the blood sea became a part of it, occupying a quarter of its area. Ha ha! My opportunity has arrived. Seeing that the nether realm had completely appeared, Xianxia laughed out loud and walked out of the darkness, arriving in the sky above the nether realm. Who is he? Why are there other living beings in the nether realm? Seeing Xianxia, everyone could not help but exclaim in surprise. Among the people present, the lowest cultivation level was at the late stage of the sage-to-be realm. Those below this level could not come here. As for Xianxia, he was only at the cultivation level of Xianxia, so he was naturally not taken seriously by everyone. However, he, a mere Xianxia, was able to hide from everyone's perception and quietly appear under their noses. This was shocking. When did Xianxia become so strong that he could hide from the perception of the powerful beings? Xianxia was a big realm. Therefore, the gap between Xianxia, who were both Xianxia, could be very big. Just like the gap between the innate realm and the Jianghu realm. This was the gap between Xianxia and the powerful beings. No wonder the powerful beings were shocked. If it were anyone else, they would be the same. That fellow Taoist's name is Fengdu. Because he opened up the ghost path and enlightened all ghosts, he is also known as the Ghost Emperor of Fengdu. Previously, he had been staying in the Blood Sea, so he appeared in the netherworld. Before Hutu could say anything, Mingi Taoist walked out of the Blood Sea with a gloomy face and told them about Xianxia's background. Taoist Mingi's current mood was extremely complicated. He did not know whether he should be happy or sad. The primordial sea of blood had become the netherworld Blood Sea. Not only was its momentum weaker, but its luck had also merged with the netherworld Blood Sea and was almost weakened by half. This almost angered Taoist Mingi. He had thought that the 6 paths of reincarnation would occupy a part of the Blood Sea's territory when the 6 paths of reincarnation appeared. He had planned to endure and give half of the Blood Sea to Hutu. After all, he had owed her such a big favor. He would treat it as paying off his debt. But he did not expect. Well, she did not care about the Blood Sea at all. She did not want any territory at all and left it to him completely. But Hutu directly moved his home. In the blink of an eye, his nether Blood Sea left the primordial land and merged into the netherworld. This was Taoist Mingi. Something that he could not even dream of. The Blood Sea was so big. Who would have thought that he would be swallowed by a world? The actions of the netherworld directly stunned Taoist Mingi. It took him a long time to react. But by then, it was already too late. Everything had become settled. He could not change anything. Of course, Even if he reacted in advance, he could not change anything. The Blood Sea merged into the Netherworld to strengthen his origin. That was the will of heaven. It could not be reversed or changed. So it's fellow Taoist Mingi. Fellow Taoist Mingi, long time no see. Seeing that the person who came was Taoist Mingi, everyone greeted him. Greetings, fellow Taoists. Taoist Mingi returned the greetings one by one. However, during this process, he did not even look at Hutu. If it were not for the fact that the identity of the Taoist master of the Azura was obtained by Hutu, he would have long raised his sword and slashed Hutu, regardless of whether he could defeat her or not. Hutu was not surprised by Taoist Mingi's attitude. If he greeted her nicely, it would be troublesome. Putting herself in his shoes, if she were Taoist Mingi, after experiencing those things just now, she was afraid that he would not be nice to her. Moreover, she was happy to have someone explain Feng Zichen's origin. According to fellow Taoist, this person is an existence who opened his own path. That's really shocking. At this time, the great divine power was interested. He was curious about Feng Zichen. Anyone who could open his own path was a talented person. His talent would not lose to them. As long as there were no accidents, he would definitely become a great divine power in the future. This was someone who could stand at the same height as them in the future. He was qualified to stand side by side with them and receive their attention. However, why did he go to the depths of the netherworld? Just as everyone was talking, Feng Zichen rushed toward the fire of hell without looking back. He was almost there. Ghost path. Ghost path. Ghost. Hiss. Poor Wei understands. That fellow Taoist Fengdu has a great fate with the netherworld. Suddenly, the great void sect's heart skipped a beat. A thought flashed through his mind as he suddenly understood something. What is a ghost? A person becomes a ghost after death. What is the ghost path? The path of death. What is the netherworld? The death realm. These clues were linked together, and the performance was already very obvious. The ghost path was a path born for the netherworld. Then, as the ancestor of the ghost path, Fengdu naturally had a great fate with the netherworld. He was one of the rulers of the netherworld. As soon as the great void Taoist finished speaking, the other great divine powers also reacted. They were all powerful people. With clues and a little deduction, it was easy for them to pry into the secrets of heaven. Naturally, they could calculate what had happened. This was clearly Taoist Fengdu. He had been summoned by the will of the netherworld to collect the opportunity. This was the benefit of being the ruler of the netherworld. Sigh. It was a destined opportunity. Other than being envious, they could only watch. Snatching another person's opportunity was equivalent to taking on a death feud. Moreover, it was a destined opportunity. Chapter 393. If they really snatched it, there would definitely be a calamity. Whoever the heavenly Tao gave it to, it belonged to. If others snatched it, there would definitely be retribution waiting ahead. Therefore, unless it was a last resort, the opportunity set by the heavens must not be touched. If they touched it, there would be a lot of trouble and it would easily anger the heavenly Tao. It could be said that the gains did not make up for the losses. Everyone looked at Feng Zichen in the netherworld and thought of the timing of the appearance of the ghost path. Suddenly, a strange thought appeared in their hearts. Is this really a coincidence? Or was it premeditated? The timing of the ghost path's appearance was too coincidental. As soon as the front foot appeared, Hutu transformed into reincarnation and caused the netherworld to appear. It was too coincidental. It was so coincidental that it was hard to believe. It made everyone's thoughts inevitably run wild. Was it really premeditated? If it was the former, it could only be said that Taoist Fengdu's luck was heaven-defying. If it was the latter, it meant that Taoist Fengdu was far from being as simple as he seemed. On the eve of the netherworld's appearance, he opened up the ghost path and set up the netherworld. Such methods were truly admirable and far beyond everyone else. Is it a coincidence or not? Also, who is he? For a moment, everyone was very curious about Feng Zichen's identity. Even Daluo Jingxian should have a background. However, in everyone's calculations, he seemed to have appeared out of thin air. He was untraceable and abnormally mysterious. At the same time, this also proved that Feng Zichen was not simple. How could a person who even they could not see through be a simple person? As for luck, that was impossible. If he was really lucky, how could he be so mysterious that they could not see through his origin? This Taoist Feng Du was most likely the incarnation of some supreme expert who had come to plot against the netherworld. Unfortunately, they could not see through his origin. On the other hand, Taoist Mingi and Hutu were extremely calm, forming a sharp contrast to everyone's curiosity. Why were they calm? It was not because of him. It was because of the two of them. He thought that he knew Feng Zichen very well. In Taoist Mingi's heart, Feng Zichen was the incarnation of an ancient supreme expert, and his strength was far beyond imagination. Coming all the way to the Blood Sea to establish the Ghost Tao, there must be a deep meaning behind it. It was a pity that Styx was inexperienced and could not see the deeper meaning of the senior. He was also too embarrassed to ask, so he could only keep it in his heart and figure it out secretly. Now, with the appearance of the netherworld, everything suddenly became clear. Senior had opened up the Ghost Tao in order to set up the netherworld. His foresight was truly admirable. If the nether realm had not appeared, who would have thought that a small Ghost Tao would have such a huge effect? It directly made its master one of the rulers of the nether realm. What was a great opportunity? This was it. Senior is indeed a senior. You are indeed powerful. With a wave of his hand, the nether realm was sucked into his bag. His ability is far beyond what we can achieve. After figuring this out, Mingi Taoist admired Feng Zichen even more. His position as the strongest in his heart had also become more and more stable. It was estimated that even if someone told him about Feng Zichen's true identity, he would not believe it. Instead, he would think that someone was fooling him. On the other hand, Huta did not think as much as Mingi Taoist. From the beginning to the end, she knew Feng Zichen's true identity and the purpose of his visit. Under the orders of the Father God, to send him the merit of splitting the heavens, to form the 6 paths of reincarnation. The so-called opening of the Ghost Tao and becoming the Ghost Ancestor was completely the result of the help of the merit of splitting the heavens. After all, if he did not want to transform into reincarnation, he would never have come to the Nether Blood Sea. In that case, how could he set up the Nether Realm in advance? This was all Feng Zichen's opportunity. It had nothing to do with anything else. Perhaps, this was also the Father God's compensation to him to make up for the merit of splitting the heavens that he had lost. The position of the Lord of the Nether Realm was almost equivalent to 10% of the merit of splitting the heavens. Hutu imagined a reasonable explanation based on the information she had. It was well organized and reasonable. Regardless of whether others believed it or not, she believed it herself. What everyone thought did not affect Feng Zichen at all. Without anyone's interference, he soon arrived at the depths of the Nether Realm, where the original hell was located, the endless fiery territory. Rumble. In the fiery territory, the fire of hell burned fiercely. Terrifying power overflowed. It was bone-chilling and froze the void. What a powerful power. This is the power that hell should have. It makes Daluo Jingxian and Sage to be tremble in fear. Standing outside hell and feeling the aura of the fire of hell, Feng Zichen said with some intoxication. Ever since he became the Lord of Hell, the terrifying power of hell no longer made him feel dangerous. Instead, it made him a little addicted. Wandering in the fire of hell, he was the only master here. He could control everything here. He was the Lord of Hell, the destination of evil. Boom! Feng Zichen gently raised his hand, and the entire hell immediately rioted. In the depths, white fire of hell appeared, exuding a terrifying aura. One after another, they flew toward Feng Zichen and gathered around him, forming a white imperial robe. At the same time, 9 origins of sin suddenly appeared in the void. Like ink, they dripped on Feng Zichen's white robe and turned into 9 dark evil dragons. The black dragon shadows were lifelike, as if they were living creatures. As they bared their fangs and brandished their claws, their ferocious aura was unmistakable. There was also an unconcealable evil in their eyes, which made people tremble in fear. These were the dragons of sin. They were the shadows of evil dragons formed by the origins of sin and the Emperor's Qi. Any one of them had the cultivation of the Tai Jingxian. The 9 evil dragons were 9 Tai Jingxian. If the 9 dragons worked together, they might not be able to defeat Daluo Jingxian, but they could still defeat the Tai Jingxian. The 9 dragons' imperial robe. Feng Zichen's white imperial robe was called the Nine Dragons' Imperial Robe. It was a connate spiritual treasure specially bred by the origins of hell for the Lord of Hell. It was a symbol of his identity. It combined both attack and defense and was extremely powerful. This treasure was very strange. Although it was a connate spiritual treasure, it did not have a fixed grade. It could be an inferior connate spiritual treasure or a supreme connate spiritual treasure. Its strength was related to hell. If hell was full of extremely evil people, those who caused chaos in heaven and earth, and those who had committed great sins in heaven and earth, the White Dragon Imperial Robe was the top connate spiritual treasure. Even a powerful person would find it difficult to break its defense. The power of the 9 evil dragons was the same. At its peak, its strength could even rival that of a sage-to-be. This connate spiritual treasure did not rely on the power of merit to advance, but on the power of karma. That was why it was said to be miraculous. What a treasure! This is the first time I've seen a treasure that relies on karma to advance. The untainted land is so vast and full of strange things. Treasure, you'll be lucky in the future. In the untainted land, there's no lack of karma. Feng Zichen shook his robe and could not hide the joy on his face. Merit was rare, but karma was not difficult to obtain. After all, it was always difficult to do good things and easy to do bad things. It was too easy to obtain karma to advance the 9 Dragons' Imperial Robe. Feng Zichen dared to guarantee that at least 5 of the 10 people he casually caught from the untainted land were tainted with karma. Among them, there were probably none with merit. In the untainted land, there were only a few people with merit. It was considered good if there was 1 in 10,000 cultivators. Most of them had karma. Even ordinary people were rarely seen. This is forcing me to catch people. Thinking of the situation in the untainted land, Feng Zichen muttered. The untainted land was not peaceful. If one wanted to live, one had to kill. Killing would result in karma. The aftermath of the battle damaged flowers, grass, mountains, rocks, and rivers. There was also karma. If one was not careful and shattered or injured the earth veins, the karma would be even greater. Who could guarantee that they had not killed anyone in the untainted land? Or had they used martial arts? Therefore, there were no good people in the untainted land. The environment was like this. What could others do? In fact, after Feng Zichen became the Lord of Hell, he received some enlightenment from the unseen world, allowing him to have a better understanding of karma and sin. Doing good to all living beings was doing evil to heaven and earth. In the eyes of heaven and earth, people should be like plants that withered and flourished. There should be life and death. Only then would it conform to the cycle of heaven and earth. However, people were greedy. Who would want to die if they could live? Therefore, driven by desire, they comprehended the cultivation method from heaven and earth. First they were immortal, then they were immortal. This was naturally excellent for all living beings. However, it was not good for heaven and earth. To heaven and earth, the so-called immortals, the undying and indestructible, were vermin and thieves. To be honest, after a cultivator became a golden immortal, even breathing was wrong in the eyes of heaven and earth. Every breath of connate chi was a sin and karma would be added to one's body. According to this, there were very few people who did not have karma in the untainted land. The heavenly Tao hated cultivators. Other than the connate god fiends that it favored, the cultivation of the other living beings was against the heavens. There were countless tribulations in the future. Reducing the number of cultivators in heaven and earth was the essence of the calamity. The heavenly Tao really did not care about the life and death of cultivators. In fact, the more cultivators died, the happier it would be. However, in the untainted land, there was not only the heavenly Tao, but also the human Tao. It was to appease the human Tao that the heavenly Tao would punish those who slaughtered the common people. Otherwise, it would not care. If the heavenly Tao really cared about all living beings, how could there be the Tao of slaughter and the Tao of Azura? Forget it. The battle between heaven and man has nothing to do with me. What's the point of thinking so much? It's better to hurry up and refine the 18 levels of hell and perfect hell. Retracting his thoughts, Feng Zichen looked at the origin of hell. There were 18 upper-class worlds there. They were the 18 levels of hell. At this time, the pagoda had been completely integrated into the origin of hell. It was only waiting for Feng Zichen to give the order, and the 18 levels of hell could be evolved. This was the purpose of Feng Zichen's visit. Since he could not control the netherworld now, He would first control hell and then slowly plan. When the 18 levels of hell were born, his incarnation would have completely gained a foothold in the untainted land. With a legitimate identity, it would be much more convenient for him to do things in the future. Chapter 394. What an evil aura. Is that a connate spirit treasure? There's actually such an evil connate spirit treasure in the primordial world? It's really unheard of. Across the world, everyone could feel the thick evil aura from Feng Zichen's 9 Dragons Emperor's robe. They could not help but exclaim. As everyone knew, there was no difference between good and bad connate spirit treasures. Whether it was good or bad depended on its owner's temperament. It had nothing to do with the function of the connate spirit treasure. However, the connate spirit treasure on Feng Zichen's body completely broke common sense. The aura it emitted was all showing its evil to the world. Interesting, very interesting. The world of the dead is really different from the world of the living. The laws are strange, the universe is upside down, and cognition is distorted. Everything is reversed. Even an evil connate spirit treasure can be born. It seems that this nether realm has great fortune and great opportunities. If there's a chance in the future, we should investigate carefully. Maybe there will be some unexpected gains. For a moment, everyone's eyes flickered as they looked at the nether realm. No one knew what they were thinking. The rules of the nether realm were different from the rules of the primordial world. Most of them were the opposite. After all, the rules of the nether realm were born from the dead. This was its foundation. Naturally, it was different from the primordial world that was dominated by the living. A world that was completely different from the primordial world. Even if they could not find opportunities in it, just comprehending the rules of heaven and earth in it could benefit the powerful. Therefore, after learning about the magic of the nether realm, these powerful people who had not appeared for a long time developed a strong interest in it. They would not let go of any opportunity that could help them cultivate. In the depths of hell, Feng Zichen stepped forward and came to the origin of hell, merging with it. Then, he used the power of the origin of hell to connect with the will of the nether realm. In the blink of an eye, Feng Zichen felt a vast will descend upon him, raising his power to an unimaginable level. Powerful. Unprecedentedly powerful. At this moment, with the support of the will of the nether realm, Feng Zichen's strength reached its current peak. With just a thought, he could distort the rules, change the world, and reverse all concepts from the very foundation. Almost omnipotent. This was something that Feng Zichen had never experienced before. He did not know how strong primordial Daluo Jingxian was. However, he knew that even the power of a great perfection demi-saint that he once possessed for a short period of time was far too insignificant compared to his current power. At this moment, even if the power he possessed was not that of primordial chaos Daluo Jingxian, it was not far from it. Go! After adapting to his sudden increase in strength, Feng Zichen did not hesitate. He immediately mobilized all his strength and extended it into the depths of spacetime, establishing a connection with the mysterious tunnel. Then, he sent all the information about the 18 levels of hell into the tunnel, hoping that the 18 levels of hell would be recognized by the tunnel. The original hell was the product of the tunnel. Feng Zichen wanted to transform hell from the fire realm to the 18 levels of hell. Naturally, he had to get the approval of the underworld. Only in this way could the 18 levels of hell created by Feng Zichen have a legitimate position and be irreplaceable. Otherwise, without the approval of the underworld, the 18 levels of hell would not be legitimate. Even if it could prosper for a while, it would not be able to prosper for a while. It would eventually decline. As for whether it could get the approval of the underworld, Feng Zichen was not worried at all. The appearance of the 18 levels of hell was completely born with a general trend. It showed that good and evil would be repaid, and the cycle of karma could perfect the netherworld and even the rules of heaven and earth. Of course, the underworld would not refuse, and there was no reason to refuse. Rumble. After receiving all the information about the 18 levels of hell from Feng Zichen, the tunnel that had fallen into silence once again moved. It was as if an ancient existence had woken up from a deep sleep. A terrifying aura filled the air, shocking the heavens and the earth. Endless rules fell, and the shadows of all things appeared. The tunnel had descended once again. Ha! What is Taoist Feng Du doing? Why did the tunnel descend? Seeing the tunnel descend, everyone was inexplicably surprised. In the primordial world, the heavenly Tao dominated everything. It was the most common. The human Tao was related to all spirits, and it would occasionally reveal miracles. Only the underworld was the most mysterious. Since the creation of the primordial world, it had only appeared once when the Lady of Earth transformed into reincarnation. However, they did not expect that Feng Zichen would make a trip to the netherworld and cause the tunnel to descend again. How could that not surprise everyone? For a moment, everyone held their breaths and stared at the netherworld. In just a few years, the tunnel that did not appear in the primordial world had appeared twice in a row. Something major was definitely going to happen. In the netherworld, Feng Zichen pointed at the original hell and communicated with the tunnel. He swore to the primordial world. "Oh, underworld! Today I, Feng Du, see that the living beings of the primordial world do not know how to be kind to the world and all living beings. They are all greedy and murderous. They have created killing sins in the primordial world, causing negative karma to plague them. The resentment in the world is boiling and chaotic. There is not a single day of peace in the huge primordial world. Therefore today, I, Feng Du, specially set up the 18 levels of hell in the netherworld. I will collect all the torture in the world and punish the evil ghosts. Let all living beings know that they will be punished in hell after death for the sins they committed when they were alive. They will taste the endless pain of the world and suffer all kinds of torture. This is a warning to everyone that they should be kind to others when they were alive. They should cultivate more merit and not do evil. In that case, I hope the tunnel will bear witness. The 18 levels of hell. Set up." After saying that, Feng Zichen formed a Dao seal with both hands and pointed at the depths of hell, activating the pagoda. Rumble, violent tremors erupted, and the pagoda was completely shattered. 18 lifeless worlds appeared and floated in the flames of hell. The original hell was far larger than Feng Zichen had imagined. When the 18 worlds were spread out, how large was the area? Even so, it did not fill it up. There was still some space left. It was really shocking. At the same time that the 18 worlds appeared, the tunnel moved. A vast power descended and turned into a huge beam of light that blasted toward hell. Bang! With a bang, the 18 worlds were blasted into pieces by the power of the tunnel and scattered in the original hell. Then the changes did not stop. Bang! An even more terrifying power was emitted from the tunnel and surged toward the original hell, completely enveloping it. Like kneading a ball of paper, the huge original hell, together with the fragments of the 18 worlds, was crushed into a large black fireball by the tunnel without any resistance. The original hell, together with the world formed by the pagoda, completely disappeared. They were fused together by the tunnel and formed a black fireball in the air. This is the embryo of the 18 levels of hell. Looking at the black fireball, Feng Zichen understood its origin as if he was blessed with good fortune. The 18 levels of hell. It was in this black fireball. As long as it explained the use of the 18 levels of hell, under the witness of heaven and earth, a new hell could be born with great luck. Closing his eyes, Feng Zichen silently recalled the original intention of the Buddhist sect of the later generations to create the 18 levels of hell. After going through his mind and correcting the inappropriate parts, he said, "The 18 levels of hell are the 18 levels of hell. Each level is a heaven and earth. The first level of the 18 levels of hell is called the hell of tongue ripping. Anyone who is alive will sow discord, slander others, be glib-tongued, argue with others, lie, and deceive others. After death, they will be sent to the hell of tongue ripping. In this hell, the little ghost will open the mouth of the person who comes, clamp the tongue with iron pliers, and pull it out. It is not pulled out at once, but stretched and pulled slowly." Feng Zichen's voice was very loud, especially with the support of the tunnel. It was even louder. Not only did it spread throughout the primordial world, even in the depths of the void, the end of time, and the endless dimensions, his voice echoed. It ensured that every living creature in the primordial world could hear it. "Ah, this tongue ripping. That's too ruthless." Hearing Feng Zichen's words, the great magical powers did not react, but the countless living beings in the primordial world were frightened. They subconsciously stuck out their tongues, but then they seemed to have thought of a terrible scene, so they quickly retracted their tongues in fear. They shivered and rolled their tongues. It was as if their tongues would be pulled out if they did not do so. It was not that the living beings of the primordial world were timid. Although the scene described by Feng Zichen was a little scary, it was not enough to scare them. Anyone who could survive in the untainted land must have experienced a lot. How could they be frightened by someone's words? It was because Feng Zichen's voice had a magical power after being enhanced by the tunnel. When it reached their ears, it actually affected their minds. In a trance, all living beings seemed to have arrived in hell, where the little ghost king with iron pliers was waiting for them. Next, all living beings encountered a scene that they did not want to recall in their lives. When all living beings woke up, the pain of having their tongues pulled out still echoed in their hearts. How could they not be afraid? Especially after experiencing it personally. The appearance of the 18 levels of hell was to warn all living beings to abandon evil and promote good. Then, how could a verbal introduction be persuasive? It was far more exciting to let them experience the pain of hell for themselves. That was why the living beings of the primordial world experienced that scene. Of course, the tunnel was not an unreasonable person. Each level of the 18 levels of hell was more painful than the last. It was not something that ordinary people could endure. Especially the 18th level of hell prepared for Daluo Jingxian. Even if it was just a projection, ordinary heaven immortals would die very miserably if they entered. Therefore, the number of levels one had to experience during this trip to the 18 levels of hell depended on the amount of negative karma one had. If one had light negative karma and had to go to the first level of hell after death, then this trip to hell would end at the first level. If one had heavy negative karma, they would go to the 18 levels of hell after death. Chapter 395. Then I'm sorry, but I'll have to experience all 18 levels of hell. If his cultivation was not as good as Daluo Jinxian's, it would be even more embarrassing. There was no need to leave the 18th level of hell. He would be burned by the fire of hell day and night in the infernal purgatory and sink into eternal oblivion. Only when his soul was completely burned and his innate true spirit turned into the origin and returned to heaven and earth could he be free. Now that the 18 levels of hell had appeared, no matter how much he said or did, it would not be as effective as killing a few people to establish his might. Moreover, the negative karma on his body had reached the level of entering the 18th level of hell. How many sins had he committed? How much damage had he caused to the primordial world? Such a vile creature deserved to die. They were also the main targets of the attack after the 18th level of hell appeared. Now, with the power of the tunnel, he could find these people from the primordial world and capture them. 1 could establish his might. 2 could save Feng Zichen a lot of trouble, so that he would not have to search for sinners in the primordial world after hell appeared. How troublesome would that be? At this moment, with the power of the tunnel, he could kill several birds with 1 stone and enjoy the fruits of others' labor. Why not? As for Daluo Jingxian, that kind of person was too powerful. Just a projection was not enough to take them down. If he really wanted to capture them, Feng Zichen would have to capture them personally. This would take time. After all, Feng Zichen's incarnation of Feng Du would not step out of the netherworld unless his cultivation was a great divine power. Rumble! Not long after Feng Zichen set up the first level of hell, the power of creation of heaven and earth suddenly descended from the void and acted on the black fireball. Buzz, buzz, buzz! The black fireball trembled for a moment, and a blood-red world was born from his body. That world was so big that it was not inferior to the upper-class world created by saints. Its origin was abnormally thick, and it was the top upper-class world. One could see that there were countless blood-red shadows in that world, waving the iron pincers in their hands. They chuckled and were abnormally ferocious. This was a life formed by rules. It did not have any emotions, so it could be fair and just. This world was the first layer of hell. Afterwards, Feng Zichen continued, revealing the 18 levels of hell one by one. The second layer of hell is called the Hell of Scissors. Those who enter this prison will have their 10 fingers cut off. The 10 fingers were connected to the heart. One could imagine how painful it would be to cut them off one by one. Moreover, these 10 fingers would grow back very soon after they were cut off. Then, the hellspawn would reduce it again. Again and again, he was tortured. Furthermore, the recovery of the finger did not consume the power of hell. Instead, it consumed his own essence. Only when the source was exhausted could he be freed. At that time, a person would only have a true spirit left. After going through reincarnation, it would be difficult to find the true self. As soon as Feng Zichen finished speaking, the second layer of hell followed and pulled all living beings into it. At the same time, the power of creation appeared, and the second layer of hell was born. The third layer of hell is called the Iron Tree Hell. There are sharp blades on the trees, and they will pierce through the skin of the person who comes and hang them on the iron trees. The sago tree was not an ordinary tree. Anyone who was entangled by it would have their source energy absorbed by it. This process was incomparably painful. Watching one's source energy flow away without being able to do anything, what kind of despair was this? The fourth layer of hell is called the hell of mirror of retribution. The mirror of retribution shines on the person's body, revealing their sins, and searching for the weakness of the person's heart. This was not physical pain, but the pain of the heart. The fifth layer of hell is called the hell of steamers. When one's soul falls into this hell, it is like falling into a pill furnace. It will be refined by the fire of hell and its source energy will be extracted. The sixth layer of hell is called the hell of bronze pillars. The seventh layer of hell is called the hell of knife mountain. The eighth layer of hell is called the hell of ice mountain. The ninth layer of hell is called the hell of frying pan. The 10th layer of hell is called the hell of cow pit. The 11th layer of hell is called the hell of stone crushing. The 12th layer of hell is called the hell of mortar. The 13th layer of hell is called the hell of blood pond. The 14th layer of hell is called the hell of wrongful death. The 15th layer of hell is called the hell of dismemberment. The 16th layer of hell is called the hell of volcano. The 17th layer of hell is called the hell of stone grinding. The 18th layer of hell is called the hell of Avicii. Those who enter this prison will be burned by the fire of hell day and night, and will never be reincarnated. As soon as he finished speaking, the projection of the hell of Avicii quietly appeared and pulled the sinners into it. Immediately, hundreds of sinners in the primordial world lost their auras. Their primordial spirits were pulled into hell and died silently. Even a few Daluo Jinxian who were entangled in negative karma suffered a loss for a moment. A wisp of primordial spirit origin was pulled into hell. Damn it! Circulating their magic power and forcibly cutting off their connection with hell, several Daluo Jinxian raised their heads and looked in the direction of the netherworld with resentment. But even so, they did not dare to make a move. It could be said that more than 80% of the experts in the primordial world had gathered in the netherworld. If they caused trouble there, even saints would have to think twice, let alone them. Not to mention the tunnel hanging high in the sky above the netherworld. They would probably be blown to pieces as soon as they appeared. You're courting death. Suddenly, a loud roar resounded through the primordial world. Monstrous demonic chi suddenly erupted from a secret place in the primordial world. It turned into a giant hand and slapped toward the netherworld. The power of this palm was earth-shattering. Its aura was no less than that of a perfected quasi-saint. It even faintly surpassed it. Clearly, this was a supreme expert who had reached the peak of the quasi-saint realm and was about to break through to the primordial chaos Tao realm. The power of that palm distorted the laws, shattered space-time, and tampered with concepts. It was obvious that it wanted to shatter the 18 layers of hell with one strike. A demonic expert. This was a true giant of the demonic path. It was also the foundation of the demonic path. It was far from what the world devastator Taoist Mo Luo, and the others could compare to. Such a figure was definitely a supreme expert from ancient times or even the primordial era. The left and right hands of the demon ancestor Rahu were existences of the same generation as the Tao ancestor Hongjun, the ancestral dragon, and the ancestral phoenix. There was no need to think carefully to know that such a supreme expert of the demonic path definitely had blood on his hands. His body was full of sins. He was an existence that provoked the great calamity of heaven and earth. He was not tolerated by heaven and earth. Originally, with the prosperity of the celestial sect of wonders, a giant of the demonic path like him, as the main target of the celestial sect of wonders, should have hidden well and not revealed any aura. In fact, he did the same. However, he did not expect that the infernal purgatory, with the support of the tunnel, used karma to search the primordial world and found him. His supernatural power could hide from the saints and even Hongjun, but it could not hide from the tunnel. Therefore he was exposed. He, who had hidden for countless years, was exposed because of an accident. Immediately. Without hesitation. He turned around and left, running toward the chaos outside the sky. If he did not leave, he would face the siege of the experts of the celestial sect of wonders. In the primordial world, only the chaos outside the sky could block the perception of the saints. But even if he left, the person who exposed him could not be let go just like that. Therefore, before he left, he angrily slapped out a palm, wanting to blow up Feng Zichen. As for whether this palm could succeed, it all depended on luck. If he succeeded, he would vent his anger. If he failed, he would find an opportunity in the future to give him retribution. Hiss! What a powerful demonic aura! This strength is not much inferior to the East Emperor. In the primordial world, a half-step primordial demon suddenly appeared. It gave all the great divinities a fright. However, although everyone was shocked, their reaction was not slow. The moment the demonic aura erupted, they had already begun to use their divinities. The first to make a move was the Lady of Earth. "How dare you!" She shouted in a low voice and suddenly waved her arm, striking toward the giant palm that was coming at her. Immediately, the shadows of all things appeared. Endless laws flowed, turning into a huge torrent that shattered the giant hand. On the other side, the Grand Pure One activated the Taiji diagram, the Heavenly Lord of the Primordial Beginning raised the Panga banner, the Grand Master of Heaven activated the 4 immortal killing swords, the Nuwa took out the Cauldron of Heaven and Earth, the Saint Jiayin held the Green Lotus flag, and the Saint Juan Ti waved the wonderful Tree of 7 Treasures. They all attacked the place where the demonic aura erupted. Dong! In the Heavenly Court, the 3 demon sovereigns made their move. Then, many great divinities prepared their divinities. Boom! A dazzling light erupted, and nothing could be seen. Everywhere was a vast expanse of white. How terrifying was the full-strength attack of all the top experts of the Hechuan sect. It was easy to destroy the upper-class world. It could even penetrate the primordial world. Even if the primordial chaos Daluo Jingxian came, he would not be able to withstand this attack and would be seriously injured. This should be the strongest attack in the primordial world. When the light dissipated, the place where the demonic aura erupted had completely disappeared. It had been beaten into a state of nothingness. Damn it! That demon escaped. After all, he was an existence that could survive the great war of immortals and demons. His life-saving methods were top-notch in the primordial world. Before everyone could react, he had escaped. Chase! Silently, the 6 saints disappeared into the primordial world and chased toward the chaos outside the heavens. This giant demon was not far from the primordial chaos Tao realm. If he broke through, it would be terrible. It was better to deal with him in time before he broke through to avoid trouble in the future. In the netherworld, Feng Zichen quietly watched all of this happen. Although he was the one who started this matter and the demon lord's target was him, at this moment, he was like a bystander and was not affected at all. The Xian sect was too strong. Especially when all the experts of the Xian sect were here. The demon lord did not even dare to show his face and ran away. At this moment, saving his life was more important. How could he care about Feng Zichen? I didn't expect that the birth of the Avicii Purgatory would attract a great demon. The waters of the primordial world are really deep. The appearance of this demon lord was completely beyond Feng Zichen's expectations. He just wanted to use this opportunity to warn the Daluo Jingxian and ask them to restrain themselves in the future. Who knew that a big fish would be lured out? What a surprise! You said that you were a half-step primordial chaos expert. Instead of hiding in the chaos outside the heavens to cultivate and achieve the Tao, you hid in the primordial world. Weren't you looking for excitement? Chapter 396. Did they really think that the immortal Tao and the devil Tao could coexist peacefully? However, this is also a good thing. After this, the celestial sect of wonders owes me a favor. After thinking for a while, Feng Zichen suddenly smiled. Although he had completely offended the demon sect because of this matter, he had also gained a favor from the Xian sect. Overall, the advantages outweighed the disadvantages. Instead of concentrating on cultivating in the chaos outside the heavens, Zhu Qing of the demonic sect risked his life and sneaked back to the untainted land to hide. There was no need to think too much to know that there was definitely a conspiracy. Furthermore, the fiend sect's conspiracy was either targeted at the primordial world or the mystic sect. Now, Feng Zichen pulled the devil out. No matter what the demon sect's plan was, it would be considered a failure. Under the surveillance of the experts of the mystic sect, even fiend ancestor Rahu could not stir up any waves in the primordial chaos, much less a half-step primordial chaos fiend. However, if that devil had not been discovered by Feng Zichen, with the devil's sect's ability to stir up trouble, he would not have been able to escape. Primordial world. In other words, it was the profound sect. That would be troublesome. If he discovered them in advance, he would be able to stop his losses in advance, and he might even be able to counter the evil sect. As such, the Xian sect naturally owed Feng Zichen a favor. As for the price of offending the demonic sect, it was nothing compared to gaining a favor from the Xian sect. In the end, this world belonged to the celestial sect of wonders. In comparison, the demon sect was just a loser. A stray dog. So what if he offended him? Needless to say, Feng Zichen had a feud with the demon sect many years ago. Now, he had even refined demon ancestor Rahu's supreme treasure, the Stupa Pagoda, into the 18 levels of hell. It could be said that they had formed a deadly feud. Therefore, when facing the demon sect, his interests were aligned with those of the Xian sect. Whatever the demon gate wanted to do, it was always right for them to destroy it. He watched as the 6 sages headed to the chaos beyond the heavens to track down the demonic path's titans. Feng Zichen knew that even if the sage could not catch up, the devil would not be able to appear in the primordial world for the time being. Therefore, he no longer paid attention to the primordial world and focused his attention on the 18 levels of hell. At this moment, the 18 layers of hell had been completely born. They were shaped like inverted pagodas. One layer after another, they extended towards the depths of the netherworld realm, towards the bottom of the 9 underworlds. That hell was incomparably deep, and the deeper one went, the darker it became. There was no light at all, and it was extremely horrifying. A strange aura pervaded the air. Furthermore, the periphery of the infernal realm was shrouded in a dark red light, which was abnormally ferocious. It was formed from the baleful aura of heaven and earth, and it could corrode everything. It could prevent outsiders from getting close to hell, and it could also prevent evil spirits from escaping. It was the first layer of defense of hell. In the infernal realm, there were countless torture platforms with all sorts of torture instruments on them. There was a rich variety of torture instruments, which summed up all the torture methods of the great desolate Aeon. It was very frightening. The 18 levels of hell were different from the 18 levels of hell. In later generations, the 18 levels of hell created by the Buddhists were not divided according to levels, but according to different types of crimes. Depending on the sins one committed, one would enter different hells. Therefore, the 18 levels of hell of the Buddhist sect did not have a hierarchy and were completely equal. However, Feng Zichen's 18 levels of hell were different. His hell completely followed the idea that the deeper the sin, the greater the suffering. Therefore, each level of hell was more terrifying than the last. Of the 18 levels of hell set up by the Buddhist sect, Feng Zichen only took a fancy to the number and name of the 18 levels. The rest were nothing to him. After all, the philosophy of the Buddhist sect, they did not cultivate in this life, but focused on the next life. It was really unpleasant. Therefore, Feng Zichen made changes to the 18 levels of hell. He integrated the hell set up by the Taoist sect in the future into it. For example, the Tendon Hanging Prison, the Yuwang Prison, the Fire Pit Prison, the Fengdu Prison, the Blood Pool Prison, the Skinning Prison, and so on. It made the 18 levels of hell even more terrifying. The 18 levels of hell did not represent 18 tortures, but 18 worlds. There were thousands of tortures in them, and they were all unimaginably cruel. Otherwise, how could they intimidate the common people? Moreover, the hell set up by Feng Zichen could extract the origin of ghosts on every level. The mistakes made by all living beings were both big and small. Naturally, they could not stay in hell forever to be punished. Once the sentence was over, they would naturally reincarnate. However, the sentence was not easy to control. Feng Zichen might as well not set a sentence. He would directly let hell extract its origin. When its origin was exhausted, the sentence would be considered over. This way, he could save a lot of manpower and strengthen the origin of hell. It could be said that he could kill several birds with one stone. In this way, the 18 levels of hell have been established. I hope that all living beings will remember the immortal Tao of Ascension, the noble Tao of Reincarnation, the filial Tao of Reincarnation, the fair Tao of Reincarnation, the virtuous Tao of Reincarnation, and the vicious hell. In the future, if you want to become an immortal and attain the Tao, you still need to cultivate more merit. Looking at the 18 levels of hell, Feng Zichen suddenly moved. He used the great Tao mantra again to persuade all living beings to be good. The fundamental purpose of hell was to warn all living beings and make them be good to heaven and earth. Even pulling people into hell to be punished was to deter all living beings in the primordial world. It was not to punish for the sake of punishment. This was the foundation of hell. It could not be messed up. Otherwise, Hell's foundation would be unstable and it would be in danger of being overturned at any time. Don't deceive your heart in life. Who will be spared by the gods and ghosts? Good and evil will be repaid in the end. It's only a matter of time. In the end, Feng Zichen even composed a song for all living beings to remember in their hearts and recite at all times. As soon as Feng Zichen finished speaking, a gust of cold wind suddenly blew in the primordial world, blowing on all living beings. It was eerie. It was as if an evil ghost was whispering in their ears, causing them to involuntarily recall their trip to hell. Their bodies could not help but tremble in fear. We never forget His Majesty the Ghost Emperor's words. Immense fear assaulted them. All living beings hurriedly knelt on the ground and shouted in a trembling voice. For a moment, the might of the Ghost Emperor of Fengdu intimidated the primordial world. No, I was wrong. I won't dare to do it again. Suddenly, several shrill screams sounded in the primordial world. The 18 levels of hell were established. The evil spirits that had been captured earlier immediately appeared in the void and fell into hell. They first experienced the torture of the first 17 levels of hell before falling into the pitch-black infernal purgatory. These screams were emitted by the evil spirits who could not withstand the torture. Of course, this scene was projected in the primordial world. It allowed all living beings to see it clearly. Hiss! Seeing this scene, all living beings could not help but feel a chill from the depths of their souls. Their bodies trembled even more violently. This, fellow Taoist Fengdu, isn't this 18 levels of hell too ferocious? It's against the harmony of the heavens. At the side, the Empress of Earth could not help but feel sympathy for the living beings when she saw this scene. She sent a voice transmission to Feng Zichen. Empress, if all living beings are good, these 18 levels of hell are just decorations. How can there be a violation of the harmony of the heavens? If all living beings are evil, these 18 levels of hell will punish evil spirits. They deserve it. Only then can they show the fairness of the heavenly Tao. Shaking his head, Feng Zichen replied. If they were good, this hell naturally had nothing to do with them. There was no need to care. Those who feared hell were mostly those who harbored evil intentions. The appearance of hell was to warn these people and make them dispel the evil intentions in their hearts. Sigh. After sighing, the Empress of Earth did not say anything else. She naturally understood such a simple logic. However, seeing all living beings like this, she could not help but feel sorry for them. This was a result of their personality. If they wanted to change it, it would not be a one-time effort. Boom boom boom. As the evil spirits entered the infernal purgatory, wisps of black gas surged out from the depths of hell and merged with the 9 dragons emperor robe on Feng Zichen's body, increasing his power by a little. This was the magical effect of this treasure. It could become stronger with the strength of hell. Freeze. Forming a seal with one hand, Feng Zichen pointed at the 18 levels of hell. With a loud sound, the hell slowly sank until it was level with the ground of the first level of hell. All right. In that case, it looks much more pleasing to the eye. As hell sank into the ground, the terrifying phenomena in the surroundings disappeared one by one. Although this place still looked terrifying, it was far less terrifying than before. After doing all this, Feng Zichen raised his head and looked at the sky. There, the origin of hell still existed. Even though the 18 levels of hell were born, it did not exhaust all of its strength. However, the origin of hell was much smaller than before. It was about a quarter of its original size. Moreover, its color had also changed. It had changed from pitch black to pure white. The aura of death and sin on its body had also been replaced by a huge aura of life and holy aura. Although the size of the origin of hell was smaller, its power seemed to be stronger and purer. Thinking about it, the origin of hell was already dense in the beginning. With the addition of the pagoda, the origin of hell was even denser. The birth of the 18 levels of hell consumed the power of the pagoda. The origin of hell did not consume much. It was normal for there to be some left behind. As for the change from black to white and the change in aura, that was the principle of the cycle of heaven and earth. Extreme yang gave birth to yin, and extreme yin gave birth to yang. All things in the world, most of them could not escape this law. Life and death were the same. If the end of life was death, then the end of death was life. After fusing with the pagoda, the aura of death of the origin of hell reached its limit. It automatically gave birth to the aura of life and occupied the center. When the aura of death completely transformed into the 18 levels of hell, the aura of life was no longer concealed and was naturally exposed. Good stuff. Looking at the white ball of light in front of him, Feng Zichen revealed an infatuated expression. This was the origin of life, the origin of creation. It was a true primordial treasure. It was a treasure even more precious than the Daluo Dao fruit. Even if a quasi-sage swallowed it, there would be endless benefits. In an instant, Feng Zichen felt several gazes fall on him. No, it was the origin of hell. Those were the greedy gazes of a group of powerful beings outside the netherworld realm. This item's origin was too dense. It was not inferior to the connate origin of a quasi-sage at the peak of the quasi-sage realm. It was a supreme creation. If they could snatch it and refine it, they might be able to take a step closer and glimpse into the mysteries of the primordial chaos Dao realm. With this thought in mind, everyone could not help but be tempted. Even a few powerful beings at the late stage of the quasi-sage realm subconsciously clenched their hands, eager to give it a try. The lower their realm, the more they desired the origin of hell. Because when their realm was high, the origin of hell was of little use to them. It might not be able to help them break through. However, it was different for cultivators with low realms. The origin of hell could definitely help them take a step closer. Therefore, they had an incomparable desire for the origin of hell. Their gazes towards the origin of hell became passionate. They were like evil spirits who had not eaten for many days and suddenly saw delicious food. When their gazes fell on Feng Zichen, they felt a tingling pain. At this moment, there was no doubt that if it were not for the Hutu and the group of powerful beings present, those who coveted the origin of hell would definitely rush into the netherworld realm and tear Feng Zichen apart to seize the origin of hell. Good boy. There are so many experts. This item must not be left behind. Sensing the spying of many powerful beings, Feng Zichen immediately made a decision. The origin of hell must not be left behind. As the saying went, one was not afraid of thieves stealing, but one was afraid of thieves thinking about it. If he accepted the origin of hell, those powerful beings would probably target him and think of ways to snatch the origin of hell from him. Just thinking about this kind of situation was scary. Who could sleep soundly if they were targeted by dozens of late-stage quasi-sages or even higher existences? Therefore, the origin of hell could not be left behind. This was the source of trouble. I was really careless. At this moment, Feng Zichen could not help but secretly blame himself. He was so complacent that he forgot to hide the origin of hell in advance, exposing it to the public and attracting everyone's attention. If not for that, he would have secretly hidden the origin of hell, and no one would have known. Sigh. Thinking of this, Feng Zichen sighed again and again. It would be better for him to hide such a good thing and slowly refine it to improve his cultivation. He was really muddle-headed. He even forgot to reveal his wealth. However, at this point, it was useless to think too much. It was better to think of a way to make up for it. Open. Closing his eyes, Feng Zichen mobilized all the mana in his body. With Panga's method when he split open the sky, he slashed at the origin of hell. Rumble. Instantly, the origin of hell was shattered. Yin and Yang were opened, and creation was born. Endless rules were manifested, and a world was gradually born. Splitting heaven and earth. This was the method that Feng Zichen thought of. He really couldn't bear to give away the origin of hell. Why should he give away his own treasure? He might as well use this as the foundation to continue to evolve the world and completely consume the origin of hell. In this way, the origin of hell would be gone. No matter how much everyone coveted the origin of hell, they couldn't go to the netherworld and take away a world, right? Feng Zichen expressed. He was very willing for everyone to do this. In that case, it wouldn't be Feng Zichen who dealt with them, but the will of the netherworld that was comparable to a saint. Open, open, open. Then, Feng Zichen used his finger as a sword and waved it 5 times at the origin of hell before he stopped. 5 dazzling sword lights flew out of his hand with boundless Taoist rhymes. They slashed the newborn world and divided it into 6 pieces. Rumble. The rules of heaven and earth changed because of this, turning from one world into 6 worlds. Fengdu 6 days. What Feng Zichen wanted to do was to open up Fengdu 6 days. It was rumored that there were 6 heavens above Fengdu Luo Mountain. The Emperor of Fengdu set up 6 heavenly palaces here as the headquarters to manage and test ghosts. Among them, there were 6 heavenly ghosts and gods. As the subordinates of the Emperor of Fengdu, they were to protect the supreme dignity of the Ghost Emperor. Chapter 397. Turning 1 into 6. Although the area of the world had become smaller, but correspondingly, the speed of its derivation had undoubtedly increased greatly. In less than 100 years, the vast and boundless sky of the 6 directions appeared in the sky above Fengdu Luo Mountain, which was the highest point of the netherworld. Boom! The moment the 6 heavens were born, in the primordial world, above the 9 heavens, Zhouxing shone brightly. Streams of origin power drooped down and poured into the netherworld. One could see that. After the starlight fell into the netherworld, it merged with the source of extreme Yin, forming the shadows of dim stars that appeared in the sky above the netherworld. First, the great sun appeared and hung in the sky. The sky was pitch black, but it strangely emitted light, illuminating the dark netherworld. That was the sun of the underworld. The essence of the sun fell into the netherworld and ignited the source of extreme Yin, reaching the point of extreme Yin giving birth to Yang, turning into a dark sun. This was the only Yang in the netherworld. It was also the hope of ghost cultivators to become immortals. Ghosts were formed from Yin Qi. If one wanted to become an immortal and attain the Tao, one had to remove all the Yin Qi in one's body and turn Yin into Yang. And the sun of the underworld was formed from Yang Qi. Bathed in its light, one's cultivation speed would undoubtedly be greatly accelerated. This was a supreme treasure for ghost cultivators. After the sun, a faint moon appeared. It was cold and cheerless, dotted with a few wisps of light, releasing an oppressive cold air. This was the moon of the underworld. After the essence of the sun fell into the netherworld, it merged with the source of extreme Yin, forming a bright moon. It contained the purest innate extreme Yin Qi. It was of great benefit to cultivators who had just entered the ghost path or cultivators who specialized in the path of extreme Yin. After it, specks of starlight appeared and floated in the sky, flashing. If one didn't look carefully, they wouldn't be able to notice it at all. This was the projection of Zhouxing. They were far less powerful than the sun and moon, and they didn't have anything to rely on in the netherworld. Therefore, after coming to the netherworld, they could only turn into specks of starlight to announce their existence. Rumble. The sun and moon were born, and the projection of Zhouxing appeared. The netherworld shook and became more stable and perfect. I didn't expect that there would be such benefits in opening Fengdu for 6 days. Seeing the changes in front of him, Feng Zichen could not help but feel a little surprised. He had opened up the 6 heavens of Fengdu in a hurry. He had not expected that their appearance would cause the netherworld to be further perfected. This was truly a pleasant surprise. Di Jun. Suddenly, Feng Zichen's face turned cold. He gritted his teeth and shouted a name. Zhouxing's phantoms had all appeared, but only the Emperor star projection that symbolized the Ghost Emperor was missing. How could he not be angry? The purple star was sealed by Di Jun and could not manifest in the great desolate Aeon. Naturally, it was even more impossible for it to manifest in the underworld realm. Just as Feng Zichen was getting angry, the 6 heavens of Fengdu changed again. Buzz buzz buzz. One of the heavens suddenly trembled slightly as it began to absorb the tribulation aura, baleful aura, evil aura, and so on. What happened? The sudden change woke Feng Zichen up from his anger. He looked at the 6 heavens of Fengdu in front of him in surprise and bewilderment. Why should he care about Di Jun? He could not be arrogant for more than a few days. Moreover, it was useless even if he cared. He could not defeat Di Jun. Now, it was more important to care about the matter in front of him. This is. Looking at the sky that was crazily absorbing evil aura, Feng Zichen's heart stirred slightly. He vaguely understood something. The 6 heavens of Fengdu had their own uses. One of the heavens was the place where the evil god lived. This evil god did not refer to the ghost god who did all kinds of evil, but the ghost god who arranged the plague to cause the great calamity. The netherworld realm had a high status, and only the 18 levels of hell could not show its might. Therefore, the evil god was born because of this. If the atmosphere of the human world was bad, and they took evil as glory and good as disaster, the netherworld realm's ruler, Emperor Fengdu, who lived in the Yin Mountain, would feel it and expel the ghost god to the human world. Or it would cause war or it would spread the plague. It would cause the world to be in chaos. Killing to stop killing, violence to curb violence, purge heaven and earth, and rebuild order. It would show the majesty of the Emperor Fengdu. The Yin court has not appeared, but the authority of the Emperor Fengdu has already begun to manifest. Is it so urgent? After thinking it through, Feng Zichen muttered. Without thinking, he knew that the only person in the netherworld who could guide the changes of the 6 heavens of Fengdu under his nose was the will of the netherworld. It seemed that the netherworld had been holding back for a long time. As soon as it appeared in the world, it could not wait to show its presence. Feng Zichen also understood the thoughts of the will of the netherworld. Look, as his brother, the heaven realm, had already become the center of the power of the primordial world. Looking at him, he had just been born. If he did not do a few things that would cause a sensation in the primordial world, how could he compete with the heaven realm? Wouldn't he be weaker than the heaven realm? Therefore, he even took the initiative to guide the changes of the netherworld to increase his right to speak in the primordial world. However, by doing so, the will of the netherworld completely messed up Feng Zichen's plan of low-key development. He had originally planned to open up the 6 heavens of Fengdu and use it to nurture his team. When the Ghost Path had some experts to support him, he would participate in the battle for the primordial world to establish the supreme position of the netherworld. But now, the netherworld did not give Feng Zichen a chance to develop at all. It directly let him join the battle for the primordial world to seize the power of heaven and earth. F***CK. At this moment, Feng Zichen really wanted to curse. The netherworld had just been born. It had no people or things. He was a commander without an army. What could he use to compete with the demons and the heaven realm? By relying on his head? If he did not leave the netherworld, he could still protect himself. Once he left the netherworld, he probably did not need Di Jun to make a move. Just one of the 10 great demon gods of the demon race would be able to blast his incarnation into pieces. Therefore, the will of the netherworld was completely forcing him. Wait. Not at all. He Chen could not. The Empress of Earth. The Magi could also do it. With a thought, Feng Zichen had an idea. However, this matter was not urgent. He had to deal with the matter in front of him first. After the 6 heavens of Fengdu had finished evolving, the origin of hell was still not exhausted. However, there was only a little bit left. It was of great use to Daluo Jingxian, but its effect on the saint was minimal. Therefore, when they saw the current appearance of the origin of hell, those prying gazes immediately disappeared. Phew, sensing this, Feng Zichen could not help but heave a sigh of relief. He really could not feel at ease being remembered by so many powerful figures. After all, no matter how strong his strength was, his essence was still Daluo Jingxian. Therefore, he did not intend to leave behind such a small amount of the origin of hell. Go! As he spoke, Feng Zichen waved his hand and sent the small ball of the origin of hell into the ground of Yin Mountain, fusing with the origin of Yin Mountain. Immediately, under Yin Mountain, a magical world was slowly born. That was Fengdu Hell. As everyone knew, there were 19 levels of hell. This Fengdu Hell was the legendary 19th level of hell. Those who were powerful and wreaked havoc in the world would be imprisoned in Fengdu Hell and would never be reincarnated. That's right, it was a human, not a ghost. This was a hell specially targeted at Daluo Jingxian. As long as there was a Daluo Jingxian wreaking havoc in the primordial world, the great emperor of Fengdu could suppress him in Fengdu Hell and never be able to escape until the primordial world was destroyed. Although the 18 levels of hell were strong, in theory, they could suppress Daluo Jingxian. However, it was a hell targeted at the dead. How could Daluo Jingxian die? He would not die. How could he suppress Daluo Jingxian? Therefore, this was a paradox that could never be realized. This was the birth of Fengdu Hell. In Fengdu Hell, there was no trace of pre-celestial qi, no rules of heaven and earth, and no concept of time and space. There was only endless silence and despair. There was also endless darkness. This place was infinitely close to nothingness. Only such an environment could suppress Daluo Jingxian. Otherwise, with Daluo Jingxian's strength, as long as there was a trace of rules, he could use this as a basis to forcefully break through the world and escape. Phew! Only then can hell be considered a problem. Seeing that everything was on the right track, Feng Zichen heaved a sigh of relief. After working for so long, he had finally opened up hell completely. This also meant that it was time to reap the harvest. Rumble. In the sky. The gaze of the heavenly Tao appeared. The black and yellow merit gathered. It surged towards Feng Zichen in a mighty manner. Although the merit obtained from opening up hell was far inferior to the merit obtained from turning the earth into reincarnation, it was still about 10%. It was almost comparable to the merit obtained from establishing the three pure ones. Speaking of which, the merit obtained from establishing the three pure ones was actually not much. If one were to really talk about it, the amount of merit could not even be ranked in the top 10 of the primordial world. They could become saints. It was said that they became saints by establishing a sect, but in fact, it was not. They relied on the merit of opening the heavens to become saints. The so-called merit of establishing a sect was just a primer to open the merit of opening the heavens. If not, why was the strength of the three pure ones stronger than Zhu and Ti when they both established a sect to become saints? It was because the way the two became saints was completely different. Boom. Merit entered the body. Feng Zichen's cultivation was soaring. This time, he did not refuse to use merit to increase his cultivation. He was not worried about the possible hidden dangers at all. That was because the Emperor of Fengdu was only an incarnation. Using merit to increase his cultivation did not affect his main body at all. He could also use this opportunity to see the pros and cons of using merit to increase his cultivation. In that case, how could Feng Zichen not do it? The reincarnation merit that he had obtained earlier, plus the hell merit that he had obtained now, Feng Zichen did not hold back at all. He took them all out to increase his cultivation. Next, Feng Zichen's cultivation began to soar. Daluo Jingxian was in the middle stage. Daluo Jingxian was in the late stage. Daluo Jingxian was in the great perfection. The early stage of the quasi-saint, the middle stage of the quasi-saint, the late stage of the quasi-saint. In a short moment, with the help of merit, Feng Zichen's cultivation advanced from the early stage of the Daluo Jingxian to the late stage of the quasi-saint, becoming a great magician. Only then did he stop the momentum of his advancement. However, the remaining merit was not enough to advance him to the level of the great perfection of the quasi-saint. Even so, it was shocking enough. Although the quasi-saint and Daluo Jingxian were in the same realm, they were two completely different existences. The former had already begun to transcend the river of time and space, while the latter was still struggling in the river of time and space. The difference was obvious at a glance. It was like the difference between heaven and earth. What is that? Originally, everyone thought that it was over, but they didn't expect that the changes weren't over yet. They saw an origin suddenly droop down from the tunnel, forcefully twisting Feng Zichen's foundation, turning the earth flower on his head into an earth flower. For a moment, Feng Zichen's body changed again. Although his realm didn't increase, his aura was much stronger. He also had the temperament of the Lord of all things, transcending the gods and boundless majesty. Today, the great magicians of the primordial world saw a scene that surprised them. A Taoist priest who had just entered the Daluo Jingxian had crossed 5 small realms and 1 big realm in a short moment, becoming a great magician of the late stage of the quasi-saint. Moreover, he had also bloomed the only 2 earth flowers of the primordial world. It was unheard of and unseen. His cultivation speed was so fast that it could be said to be the best in the primordial world. It was enough to be recorded in the primordial world's history books and be admired by future generations. Fast. Too fast. This was the only thought in everyone's mind. What a great creation! However, how much of his strength can he unleash if he doesn't have the experience to match up to his cultivation base? Everyone was first shocked by the speed of Feng Zichen's advancement. Then, they couldn't help but think of the drawbacks of doing so. It didn't seem like a big problem to use merit to increase 1 or 2 small realms. However, it was the first time in the primordial world that Feng Zichen crazily used merit to increase his cultivation base. The strength of one's strength came from the origin, realm, and experience. The origin represented the upper limit of one's magic power. The more profound it was, the more powerful one's magic power was. The realm represented the control of the great Tao and the rules. The more profound it was, the greater its influence on the world. Experience was combat experience. The more abundant it was, the more control one had over oneself. One could often exert the greatest advantage at the smallest price. Therefore, in order to fully exert one's strength, all 3 were indispensable. However, Merit could only increase one's cultivation base by one's realm and nothing else. This was like a child suddenly possessing the strength of an adult. He was strong and could be said to be invincible among children, but could he be a match for a normal adult? Obviously, he couldn't. This was Feng Zichen's current situation. If he had the corresponding cultivation realm but not the corresponding strength, any quasi-sage primary stage expert would be able to compete with him. Not necessarily. After all, Feng Zichen had bloomed the flower of the earth. His strength should be a little stronger. As expected, using merit to increase one's cultivation base isn't as simple as I thought. In fact, just as the great magicians had guessed, Feng Zichen's current situation was more or less like this. His realm was at the late stage of the quasi-saint realm, but his innate origin was still at the level of Daluo Jingxian, without the slightest increase. The experience from Daluo Jingxian to the late stage of the quasi-saint realm was completely blank, and it didn't help him at all. Compared to before, his strength lay in the fact that his influence on the world was even deeper. His mastery of the great Tao and the rules was even more at will. Strong, much stronger than before. If the current Feng Zichen were to deal with the previous him, it could be said that he could suppress him effortlessly. Chapter 398. However, if he were to face an expert of the same level, the situation would be completely reversed. He would probably be easily suppressed. The strength that was increased by merit was the lowest among the same realm. This was not a lie. Even the saints were the same. The saints who became saints with the method of merit were the weakest saints. This was personally said by Tao ancestor Hong Jun. It could not be false. In the future, if the incarnation of Fengdu fought with others, he could only rely on his realm to suppress it. It would be difficult for him to lose against Daluo Jingxian as a quasi-saint. With Feng Zichen's current situation, he could only show off in front of Daluo Jingxian. If he showed off in front of a quasi-saint, he might fail. However, this was the netherworld. The strength he could unleash was far from what he was showing now. With the origin of hell, he could unleash strength comparable to a perfected quasi-saint. With the origin of the netherworld, he could unleash strength comparable to Daluo Jingxian. This was the benefit of the karmic rank. He was almost invincible in the netherworld. It seems that I have to cultivate well from now on. Feeling the weak origin in his body, Feng Zichen was a little distressed. Experience was something that relied on the accumulation of experience. It was impossible to achieve great results in a short period of time. However, there were many ways to quickly grow the innate origin other than painstakingly condensing it. However, these methods required the consumption of a large number of precious innate treasures. Especially the innate origin that could increase the late stage of the quasi-saint realm. Its value was comparable to a high-grade innate spirit treasure. Destroying a high-grade innate spirit treasure just to increase the origin of the Fengdu incarnation? Feng Zichen felt that he was not so prodigal or rich. Fengdu incarnation should cultivate by himself. At the same time, he could recomprehend every realm to increase his experience and make up for his shortcomings. Anyway, he had nothing to do now. Instead of being idle, he might as well cultivate. Before the end of the Great Magi Demon War, the thing that Fengdu incarnation lacked the most was time. However, there was no rush. The netherworld had appeared. The most important thing was to suggest the Yin Court. The heavens had the heavenly court, which managed the immortals and controlled the wind, rain, thunder, and lightning. On Earth, there should be an underworld court that governs all ghosts and controls life, death, misfortune, and fortune. Only when the heavens and earth were in balance was the truth of the great Tao. Having made up his mind, Feng Zichen turned around and walked toward Hutu. He wanted to talk to her about establishing the Yin Court. After all, he didn't have the strength, the soldiers, or the food. It was impossible for him to establish the Yin Court by himself. Not to mention whether the great mystical abilities of the primordial world were convinced or not. Just the heavenly court's attack was enough for him to suffer. Primordial world. There was a shaman. This was enough for the demons to worry about. If another Yin Court appeared, it would be better than fighting for power. Wouldn't the demon race explode? Dong Huang would probably be able to turn Feng Zichen and the Yin Court he had established into dust once he struck the bell of chaos. The demon race would never tolerate the existence of the Yin Court. Therefore, if the Yin court wants to be established, it had to be the sorcerer tribe. Only the Yin court established by the Magi could not be afraid of the demons and shock the primordial world. At the same time, the Yao didn't dare to rashly attack the Yin court. Moreover, the netherworld was the backup plan that Pangu had prepared for the Magi. It was only natural for them to establish the Yin court. In addition, Feng Zichen was a Magi of the Magi. He naturally had to live up to his identity and plan for the future of the Magi. Although establishing the Yin court could not change the fate of the Magi, it could protect the Magi who remained in the netherworld and leave some foundation for them so that they would not decline so miserably. This would not be in vain for him to interact with the Magi. Whoosh! Whoosh! Just as Feng Zichen turned around, two rays of light suddenly appeared out of nowhere and flew toward him at an extremely fast speed. The speed was so fast that it seemed to be traveling through the river of time and space. It ignored all space-time and created the illusion that space-time was stagnant. The moment Feng Zichen saw them, they suddenly appeared in front of him. A powerful force suddenly attacked, forcing Feng Zichen to take a few steps back. What a powerful force! Could it be that they... As he retreated, Feng Zichen felt something in his heart and vaguely sensed the origins of the two. In the netherworld, there were only two treasures with such power, and they had not appeared in the world. There were only two treasures that met such conditions. The Book of Life and Death and the Spring and Autumn Samsara Brush. This was one of the few treasures in the Nether Realm that could retain its full strength after leaving the Nether Realm. It could be said that the Book of Life and Death and the Spring and Autumn Samsara Brush were the most precious treasures in the Netherworld apart from the 6 Paths of Reincarnation disc. This was the symbol of the Netherworld. After stabilizing his footsteps, Feng Zichen raised his head to look at the two balls of light floating in the air. The balls of light were dark purple, indicating that countless mysterious runes were flowing around them to isolate them from the outside world. Even with Feng Zichen's current cultivation, he could not see through the surface of the balls of light to investigate the situation inside. After waiting quietly for a while, he did not sense any dangerous aura. Feng Zichen tentatively used his spiritual sense to touch the two dark purple balls of light. Kacha! Kacha! With a shattering sound, the two balls of light shattered, revealing a jade book and a jade brush. They were the treasures of the Netherworld, the Book of Life and Death and the Spring and Autumn Samsara Brush. Good! Seeing these two items, even Feng Zichen, who had seen treasures before, could not help but exclaim in surprise. The Book of Life and Death and the Spring and Autumn Samsara Brush were both supreme-grade Khanate merit numinous treasures. They were powerful and could be said to have endless uses. Although the Book of Life and Death was small, it recorded the information of all living beings in the primordial world under Daluo Jingxian. Their life and death, misfortune and fortune, their lifespan, and when they died were all recorded. This treasure not only involved the Tao of life and death, but also the Tao of fate. With this treasure, one might be able to see the mysteries of fate. It was truly unfathomable. Moreover, it was the human book of the 3 books of heaven, earth and man. It had boundless luck. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was one of the top 10 Khanate numinous treasures of the primordial world. The Spring and Autumn Samsara Brush was also known as the Judge's Brush. Although it did not have as great a background as the Book of Life and Death, it was still extremely powerful. In the future, its name would resound throughout the 3 realms, causing people's expressions to change. With a stroke, it could change one's lifespan, change misfortune, and even determine life and death. This was a Khanate numinous treasure nurtured by the Tao of life and death. It had even fused with a portion of the concept of reincarnation, making it even more powerful. With a stroke of the brush, it could stir up the laws of life and death and achieve the effect of reversing life and death. Its power could be said to be terrifying. In particular, the Spring and Autumn Samsara Brush and the Book of Life and Death were a set of Dharma treasures. When the two were combined, their power would increase exponentially. Living beings under Daluo Jingxian only needed to use the Judge's Brush to write his name in the Book of Life and Death. In an instant they would die. Even a Zenith Heaven Golden Immortal was not unkillable. As long as he captured a wisp of his aura and sent it into the Book of Life and Death, he would use the Judge's Brush to swipe fiercely. Even Daluo Jingxian would not end well. If it was light, his true spirit would be shaken, and if it was heavy, he would be severely injured. The Book of Life and Death and the Spring and Autumn Samsara Brush were definitely top-notch killing treasures in the primordial world. And the most terrifying thing was that he attacked in the dark. He killed without coming into contact with the dead. It was extremely sinister and impossible to guard against. In terms of this point alone, there were very few people in the primordial world who could compare to it. Even some curse-type connate numinous treasures could not compare to it in terms of silently killing people. It could be said to be the best in the primordial world. Such treasures were Fengzichen's. How could it not be exciting? In the netherworld, there were only 3 people with great divine abilities: Fengzichen, Hutu, and Taoist Mingi. Hutu was the lord of samsara and controlled the chaos treasure, the 6 paths of reincarnation. Of course, the book of life and death and the brush of reincarnation could not be given to her. Otherwise, Hutu could really do whatever she wanted in the netherworld. As for Taoist Mingi, he was the lord of the blood sea and the spokesperson of the primordial killing path. He already had 5 supreme-grade numinous treasures in his hands. These 2 treasures could not be given to him. After thinking about it, only Fengzichen, the current lord of hell and the future lord of the netherworld, was most suitable to hold the book of life and death and the spring and autumn samsara brush. Therefore, this second treasure would appear in front of Fengzichen. Buzz. Without hesitation, Fengzichen took a step forward and took the book of life and death and the spring and autumn samsara brush. As expected, these 2 items were prepared for him. Without the slightest resistance, Fengzichen branded them with his true spirit. Haha. With the treasures in his hands, Fengzichen could not help but let out a hearty laugh. Previously, he was still wondering why the book of life and death and the spring and autumn samsara brush had not been born after the netherworld had been born for so long. Could it be that they were not fated with him? Because of this, he was disappointed for a while. He did not expect that they did not appear because they were waiting for hell to be born. This time, Fengzichen had fully learned his lesson from the last time. As soon as he realized that something was wrong, he used the power of the origin of the netherworld to cover up everything around him, so that outsiders could not pry into it at all. Of course, not everyone. At the very least, he could not hide it from Hutu and Taoist Mingi. These 2 people were also the supreme gods of the netherworld. If they did not have other important tasks, they would definitely be Fengzichen's biggest competitors to become the lord of the netherworld. Because of this, Fengzichen had not become the lord of the netherworld. In terms of control of the netherworld's origin, he was not much stronger than the 2 of them. His cover-up naturally could not be hidden from the 2 of them. But this was not important. With the birth of the netherworld, the 3 of them who belonged to the netherworld naturally became an alliance. Their interests were united against the outside world. Even if they did not help him, they would not undermine him. With brisk steps, Fengzichen arrived outside the netherworld in the blink of an eye, where Hutu was. The moment he left the netherworld, Fengzichen felt a wave of discomfort. His almost invincible strength instantly disappeared. That was the strength of the netherworld's origin. After leaving the netherworld, of course, he could not use it. After a while, Fengzichen adapted to the sudden drop in strength. Fellow Taoist Fengdu, you're finally willing to come out. Chapter 399. Today, fellow Taoist, you have broadened our horizons. Seeing Fengzichen walk out of the netherworld, before he could take the initiative to speak, Huta said exaggeratedly. Actually, it was not an exaggeration. Opening up 25 top-notch upper-class worlds in a row was something that even a saint might not be able to do, and it was done so easily, as if it was effortless. This was truly shocking. Of course, these great divine abilities also knew. Fengzichen must have used a method that they did not know. However, to be able to come up with such a method, it already proved that he was extraordinary, and definitely far surpassed them. After all, the 25 upper-class worlds were placed in the netherworld. No matter how they observed, they could not understand what method Fengzichen had used to be able to open up those upper-class worlds so effortlessly. Of course, these great divine abilities would not know that Fengzichen had integrated the pagoda into the origin of hell before the netherworld appeared, preparing for today's matter. It was all for this moment to amaze the world. Think about it, opening up 18 top-class upper-class worlds in one go. How incredible was this? To be able to do this, how extraordinary would he be? He must be a great expert that was beyond imagination. Thinking about it, even if he was not a primordial chaos expert, he was not far from it. Of course, This was only Feng Zichen's original plan. It was said that plans could not keep up with changes, and this time was no exception. With the help of the will of the netherworld, he opened up the 6 days of Fengdu and the hell of Fengdu in addition to the 18 levels of hell. This was great. He had gone overboard with his acting. However, looking at everyone's attitude, it was obvious that the effect was obvious. Regardless of whether he succeeded in pretending to be a peerless big shot, he had been labeled as mysterious. That was enough. Mysterious represented the unknown. Represented infinite possibilities. That was the best way for him to hide his true identity. Ha ha. Fellow Taoist Hutu, you must be joking. That was all the power of the will of the netherworld. Poor Wei was just taking advantage of the situation. Of course, she didn't have to spend too much effort. After thinking for a while, Feng Zichen said humbly, pushing everything onto the will of the netherworld. Haha. Fellow Taoist Fengdu is really modest. When the crowd heard this, they naturally did not believe it. If all of this was really led by the will of the nether realm, then how could Feng Zichen obtain so much merit? The heavenly Tao was fair. The amount of merit that would be bestowed would depend on the amount of contributions one had made. There was no favoritism. Based on Feng Zichen's merits, it was not difficult for them to guess his role in this matter. Naturally, they did not believe his words. No one believed him. Feng Zichen didn't explain much. What he wanted was for everyone to fill in the blanks on their own. Only his own imagination was the most invulnerable. However, there were so many people here that Feng Zichen couldn't discuss the establishment of the Yin Court with Hutu. Yin Court. This was a major event that could affect the development of the primordial world. Of course, the more secretive it was, the better. It was impossible to announce it to the world. If someone with ulterior motives were to find out about this, it would be hard to avoid variables. Especially after the heavenly court found out, they would be prepared in advance. The effect of the birth of the Yin Court would undoubtedly be greatly reduced. The birth of the Yin Court required the element of surprise in order to achieve the greatest effect. Before Di Jun and the others established the heavenly court, they did not publicize it. Instead, they developed it in secret. After obtaining the Tao ancestors' consent, they made it public. Feng Zichen was such a low-key person, so he would not publicize it. Therefore, he started chatting with everyone here. Boom, boom, boom. Suddenly, a huge vibration came from the sky. Then, 6 terrifying figures descended from the sky and arrived outside the netherworld. The saints had arrived. It turned out that the 6 saints had walked around the chaos outside the sky and did not find the devil. They knew that if they continued to stay here, they would not be able to find any traces of the devil. Thus, they returned to the primordial world. However, since they had already come out, the saints could not return empty-handed. Thus, they set their sights on the netherworld. Back then, when the heaven realm appeared, the cultivation of the 6 saints was not the strongest. They were on the same level as the connate god fiends. They did not have an overwhelming advantage. They were even inferior to the Eastern Emperor Tai Yi. The demon race was powerful. In addition, the Eastern Emperor Tai Yi suppressed the primordial world. They had their eyes on the heaven realm, so no one dared to compete with them. Even the 3 pure ones had to avoid them. Therefore, the heaven realm belonged to the demon race. Outsiders had no chance to interfere, even after becoming a saint. Now that the netherworld, which was on the same level as the heaven realm, had appeared, they naturally could not stand by and watch. They could not interfere in the heaven realm, but they could not miss the netherworld. Now was different from the past. They were already saints, the peak of the primordial world. Everything that happened in the heaven realm would never happen again. Poor Wei congratulates fellow Taoist Hutu on attaining the Tao. Retracting their auras, the 6 of them congratulated Hutu. Then they said to everyone, fellow Taoists, it's been a long time since we parted in the Purple Cloud Palace. After the Tao lecture in the Purple Cloud Palace ended, the former fellow disciples went their separate ways, but it was difficult for them to meet again. It was rare for them to meet again today. Even the saints could not help but sigh. Greetings, fellow Taoist Tai Ching, fellow Taoist Yu Qing, fellow Taoist Xianxia, fellow Taoist Nuwa. Everyone returned the greeting. The former fellow disciples and the current saints could not help but feel melancholy when they saw them again. Back then, they were on the same level. Now time had passed. When they saw each other again, they were already separated by heaven and earth. In the past, when you became saints, we were not in the primordial world and did not go to congratulate you. Today, we will make up for it here. However, a great mystical ability user was ultimately a great mystical ability user. In an instant, he adjusted his mentality and even teased the Grand Pure One and the others. Congratulations, fellow Taoists, on attaining the Tao. After saying that, everyone laughed out loud. Even the Grand Pure One, who was usually indifferent, was the same. This laughter was incomparably candid, and it contained a sense of freedom. There were no schemes or tricks mixed within it. The saints had not been so relaxed for a long time. For a moment, everyone seemed to have returned to the days when they first listened to the Tao in the Purple Cloud Palace. That was a period of days without worries. Everyone only had the Tao in their hearts, and there were not many conflicts of interest. Unfortunately, everything could not go back. The past was destined to be the past. After the laughter, what was left was melancholy. Humans. They would always live in the way they hated the most. Inexplicably, everyone present was enlightened, and their state of mind actually improved slightly. Fellow Taoists, why are you here? After a moment of silence, the Lady of Earth was the first to break the silence. As soon as she finished speaking, everyone recovered from their melancholy. The past was the past. If they were obsessed with the past, how could they improve? Looking at the future was what they should do. In the blink of an eye, everyone's Tao hearts calmed down again. They began to think about the purpose of the saint's visit. Yes, the saint came here. What was his purpose? As for congratulating the Lady of Earth for achieving the Tao, naturally, no one believed it. If they really wanted to congratulate the Lady of Earth for achieving the Tao, why did they do it earlier? Why didn't they come when she had just achieved the Tao? Instead, they came after nearly 1,000 years. Wasn't that clearly saying that there was something wrong with them? Fellow Taoist Lady of Earth, the poor Wei saw that the netherworld had just been born and the living beings inside were extinct. She wanted to send an incarnation to guard the netherworld, impart the supreme great Tao, enlighten a place, and help the netherworld evolve living beings. The 6 of them looked at each other. No one was willing to be the first to speak. In the end, as the eldest senior brother, the Grand Pure One had no choice but to stand up and say, this. As soon as he said that, everyone present was in an uproar. How shameless. Everyone present was smart. How could they not understand what the Grand Pure One meant? They had taken a liking to the netherworld and wanted to get a share of the pie. What about imparting the supreme great Tao and enlightening a place? They were all excuses. They were already sending incarnations to stay in the netherworld. Wasn't their goal clear? Fellow Taoist Grand Pure One, what do you mean? At that moment, not only did the Lady of Earth's expression change, but even the expressions of Feng Zichen and Taoist Mingyi turned ugly. Now, the 3 of them were the rulers of the netherworld. How could they tolerate outsiders spying on this place? That was the foundation of their Tao. Even if the saint wanted to touch it, they would dare to risk their lives. Stopping me from achieving the Tao is worse than killing me. It was the #1 enemy of the primordial world. If the saint's incarnation entered the netherworld, would the world still belong to them? Moreover, they did not dare to touch the heaven realm, but they dared to touch the netherworld. What did that mean? Were they looking down on the netherworld? The Grand Pure One did not say anything. Instead, he took a step forward. At the same time, the other 5 saints also took a step forward. That posture. It was obvious. He wanted to use his power to suppress others. You, the Lady of Earth, are only 1 person, but we have 6 people. If you don't agree, we will fight our way in. What can you do? Fellow Taoist, are you bullying me because I'm alone? Seeing this, the Lady of Earth questioned sternly. At the same time, just as she finished speaking, the 11 ancestral magi quietly appeared and stood behind her, staring at the 6 saints together. It was as if he was standing up for her. Yes, the Lady of Earth was not alone. There were many of them, but the Lady of Earth also had many brothers and sisters. The atmosphere at the scene. Immediately, they became nervous. Fellow Taoist Lady of Earth, now that you have lost the body of the ancestral magi and can't set up the 12 divine wraith array, you have lost your greatest reliance. If you join forces, you won't be able to stop the 6 of them from poor Wei. Besides, Poor Wei and the others don't want to occupy the netherworld, nor do they have any intention of getting involved in the cycle of reincarnation. They just want to set up a Tao field here and wait for the future to preach the Tao. In that case, are you unwilling? Seeing that the atmosphere was getting more and more tense, as if a fight was about to break out, Nuwa could not help but step forward and say. Her tone was filled with helplessness. It was as if she did not come here on her own accord, but was forced to come by someone. Thinking about it, it made sense. Nuwa had never established a sect, nor did she take in any disciples. Back then, she had even rejected the recruitment of the demons. She did not even take one of the 9 heavens seriously. Now, for the sake of the netherworld, she did not hesitate to personally come. It was obviously abnormal. Everyone could understand why the 3 pure ones had brought Xuanti here. Only Goddess Nviwa was here, which puzzled everyone. Chapter 400. Now, hearing the tone in Nuwa's words, everyone vaguely understood. There seemed to be a secret behind this matter. And the only thing that could make a saint helpless in the primordial world was the heavenly Tao. At this moment, everyone understood that the heavenly Tao wanted to interfere in the netherworld. Therefore, the 6 saints had no choice but to come to the netherworld to seize a portion of the control of the netherworld from the Hutu. However, the Hutu was not to be trifled with. No matter what reason the saint had, she could not let the saint step into the netherworld, let alone let him share her power. Her own territory. How could she easily give it to outsiders? Moreover, she was forced to give it up by others. If this spread out, how could the Hutu have the face to stand in the primordial world? Therefore, the Hutu would never give in. Even if she had to fight with the saint, she would not hesitate. In the primordial world, sometimes, face was more important than everything. This time, there was a good show to watch. With this thought in mind, everyone retreated to the side one after another, leaving enough space for both sides to silently wait for the development of the matter. Whether it was the 6 saints or the Magi, they were all figures that they could not afford to offend. If they helped either side, they would be hated by the other side. Therefore, it was better not to help either side. Anyway, this matter had nothing to do with them. You want to interfere in the netherworld with just you? Hee hee. Ridiculous? Faced with the threat of Nuwa and the others, the Hutu was not only unmoved, but she also sneered and mocked the 6 of them. Today. If he retreated, wouldn't that be saying? The Hutu and the Magi were not as good as saints. This would probably be a devastating blow to the prestige of the Magi. Therefore he could not give in. At the very least. He could not give in under the threat of the saints. Ever since they became saints, the 6 of them had never been looked down upon like this. They could not help but fly into a rage. Their expressions turned ugly, and a powerful aura rose from their bodies as they pressed towards the Hutu. Humph! With a cold snort, the 11 ancestral Magi behind the Hutu suddenly moved. Their figures crisscrossed, and Tao patterns appeared under their feet, faintly forming a powerful formation, connecting their strength together and protecting the Hutu firmly. Rumble! The pressure of the 6 saints assaulted him, and it gave rise to all sorts of phenomena. Space warped while the heavens and the earth flowed in reverse, and its might was boundlessly terrifying. However, the combined aura of the 12 grand shamans was like the divine mountain of Buzhou, suppressing and unshakable. No matter how terrifying the pressure was, it couldn't shake him in the slightest. This was the supreme divine ability. Mount Buzhou Seal. This was the supreme supernatural power that the 12 ancestors of sorcery had learned from Mount Buzhou. Of course, the Mount Buzhou seal mastered by the 12 ancestors of sorcery was different from the Mount Buzhou seal mastered by Feng Zichan. Feng Zichan's Mount Buzhou seal was formed by the fusion of Mount Buzhou's seal and the origin of the earth. It could barely display a trace of Mount Buzhou's divine might. However, the Mount Buzhou seal of the 12 ancestors of sorcery was different. This divine ability could be called the projection of Mount Buzhou, and its power was so strong that it could even suppress the primordial chaos Daluo Jingxian. Even a saint couldn't withstand this divine ability without using the power of the heavenly way. The power of this divine ability was enough to be ranked in the top 10 of the untainted land, and was far from what Feng Zichan could compare with. This was the talent of the 12 ancestors of sorcery. The advantage of Pangu's bloodline was something that Feng Zichan couldn't envy. Mount Buzhou was formed by Pangu's spine. The 12 ancestors of sorcery were formed by Pangu's blood essence. There was a connection between the two. In addition, after the 12 ancestors of sorcery cultivated the Tao of gods and demons, they had a deeper understanding of Pangu's bloodline. After that, they drew the geomancy map of the primordial world and had a clearer understanding of the primordial world and Pangu's body. The accumulation of this series of insights caused the 12 ancestors of sorcery to sublimate. They used the 12 divine wraith array to deduce Pangu's body and turned the Tao runes of Mount Buzhou for their own use. They achieved this supreme divine ability that could be said to be invincible in the primordial world. Of course. Was he really invincible in the primordial world? That might not be easy to say. However, among the suppression-type divine abilities, the Mount Buzhou seal was indeed the best. This divine ability was a surprise that the 12 ancestors of sorcery had prepared for the demons. They had originally planned to use it on Tai during the decisive battle between the Magi demons and suppress him along with the Bell of Chaos. This way, the demons would not be afraid. However, they did not expect that the plan could not keep up with the changes. Under the pressure of the 6 saints, the 12 ancestors of sorcery had no choice but to reveal their trump cards in advance and use the supreme divine ability of the Mount Buzhou seal to resist the pressure of the saints. Just as Nuwa had said earlier, without the 12 divine wraith array, if the 12 ancestors of sorcery did not use their trump cards, they would not be a match for the 6 saints. After all, it was not 1 saint, but 6. 12 against 1, they would definitely win. However, 12 against 6, the situation was reversed. Indeed, the Hutu did not lose the body of the ancestor of sorcery as the saints had thought. However, her bloodline had been purified and was fundamentally different from the other ancestors of sorcery. She was the most perfect sorcerer. The reason why the 12 ancestors of sorcery could form the 12 divine wraith array was that they came from the same origin and had the same aura. However now, the Hutu was fundamentally different from the other ancestors of sorcery. Therefore, the Hutu could not set up the 12 divine wraith array. What a powerful divine ability! The sorcerer race actually has such a method. They've hidden it so well. In the heavenly court, Jun and the others could not help but be excited when they saw the sorcerer race and the saints arguing because of the nether realm. No matter the outcome of this battle, the enmity between the sorcerer race and the saints had been formed. In the future, the sorcerer race would have a difficult time. This was what the demons were looking forward to. In this case, how could Jun and the others not be happy? Unfortunately, the changes in things were often unexpected. The sorcerer tribe's sudden display of a supreme divine ability gave them a huge fright. The aura of this divine ability was exactly the same as that of Mount Buzhou. It was like a projection of him, sacred and great, able to suppress everything. Even someone as strong as them could not help but feel a sense of powerlessness in the face of this divine ability. It could be seen how powerful this divine ability was. Among them, Yui Tai felt it the most. The moment he saw the seal of Mount Buzhou, he had a bad feeling. It was as if this divine ability was specially prepared for him. Even the Donghuang bell, which had been unchanged since ancient times, began to tremble as if it had sensed danger. This is sudden inspiration. This divine ability is used to deal with me. Vaguely, Tai Yi seemed to have understood something. The seal of Mount Buzhou was originally prepared by the sorcerer race to deal with Tai Yi. It was fine if he did not appear in the world. At that time, the secrets of heaven were chaotic and no one could see through it. Tai Yi could not detect the sorcerer race's goal. Chapter 401. However, once he appeared, the heavenly secrets were immediately clear. Tai Yi vaguely sensed the danger in advance. The change in Tai Yi and the East Emperor Bell naturally attracted the attention of the surrounding people. The Magi are so scheming. Jun, Tai Yi, Fu Shi, Kuan Peng, and the others were all top figures of the primordial world. They could be said to be extremely intelligent. After thinking about it carefully and comparing it to Tai Yi's situation, he understood the Magi's plan. His expression could not help but turn ugly, and he felt a lingering fear in his heart. If the 6 saints had not threatened the Magi and forced them to use their trump cards today, Tai Yi would have been in danger during the battle between the Magi and the demons. There was no need to doubt the power of the Mount Buzhou seal. If it was unexpected, It could definitely suppress Tai Yi and the East Emperor Bell together. Even if the East Emperor's strength was heaven-defying, he would not be able to break out of the seal in a short period of time when facing the powerful Mount Buzhou. In that case, without the help of the East Emperor, even if the Magi did not have Hutu, the demons would not be able to defeat the might of the Magi. Their defeat was set in stone. Fortunately, with the intervention of the saints, everything changed. The trump card of the Magi was forced to be exposed in advance. Although it was still troublesome, it was far less terrifying than before. Now that they were prepared in advance, it would be difficult for them to have an unexpected effect. This time, I have to thank the 6 saints. Looking at the saints below, Di Jun sighed. That's right. At the side, everyone nodded in agreement. In this battle, regardless of whether the Magi won or the 6 saints won, they did not benefit as much as the demons. They were the biggest winners. When the sandpiper and the clam fought, the fishermen would benefit. The Magi summoned the projection of Mount Buzhou. It was indeed beyond the expectations of the 6 saints. But so what? The projection was ultimately just a projection. It was not the real Mount Buzhou descending. How could it block the divine might of the saints? The Grand Pure One raised his eyelids and looked at the Buzhou mountain seal in surprise. Then he slowly said, "That's right. The projection of Mount Buzhou? The Poor Way has underestimated the witch tribe. But do you think that the projection of Mount Buzhou is enough to stop Poor Way and the others, fellow cultivator?" As he spoke, the Grand Pure One's aura grew stronger and stronger. In the blink of an eye, it had risen to an inconceivable level. Terrifying power swept out, distorting all concepts and denying past knowledge. The rules of heaven and earth moved according to his will, and the world was under his control. This was the Grand Pure One, the most supreme saint in the universe. With his peak 4th level chaotic essence cultivation base, he was the undisputed #1 saint. At the same time, his hand shook, and the primordial ultimate treasure, Taiji diagram, appeared and hung behind his head. Primordial yin and yang qi hung down, releasing a shocking pressure. After him, the other 5 saints also did not hold back. Their terrifying strength was released, suppressing the heavens and the earth, the past, present, and future. A supreme treasure appeared in his hand. Tao and logic interweaved, emitting resplendent light. It was as if he could unleash a world-shocking attack at any moment. "Do you think I'm afraid of you?" In the face of the 6 saints' coercion, the 12 ancestral sorcerers were not afraid. They raised their hands and summoned the primordial ultimate treasure, the primordial geomancy diagram. Suddenly, a miniature primordial world appeared in front of the 12 ancestral sorcerers, confronting the supreme treasure in the hands of the 6 saints. "Oh no, retreat!" Realizing that something was wrong, the powerful beings outside the nether realm fled outside of time and space without any hesitation. They were afraid that if they were late, they would be involved in the battle between them. Crazy. Are they going to destroy the primordial world? Is it worth it for the nether realm? Outside of time and space, everyone stopped and said worriedly. They were afraid that they would accidentally break the primordial world into pieces. Fellow Taoists, if fellow Taoist Grand Pure One and the others really start fighting later, we have to stop them even if we have to risk our lives. Otherwise, the primordial world will be in danger. After a while, the Great Void Taoist said with a serious face. Yes, you're right, fellow cultivator Great Void. We can't let them fight." Hearing that, everyone agreed. "By the way, Poor Way, go to the heavenly court and invite fellow cultivator Tai over. His cultivation is the most profound, and he has the connate supreme treasure, the Donghuang Bell, to protect him. With him around it might be useful." Suddenly, someone suggested. "No, the shamans and demons are irreconcilable. Fellow cultivator Tai can't wait for them to fight. If you invite him, won't you be adding to the trouble? You can't invite him over." Before anyone else could say anything, Taoist Huang Ling hurriedly objected. Inviting Tai over, did they think that the situation was not tense enough and wanted to add fuel to the fire? What a brainless person. However, that person's suggestion gave the Great Void Taoist an idea. Since they wanted to invite someone, why do they have to invite the Donghuang Tai? Wouldn't it be better to invite the Taoist ancestor directly? Therefore, the Great Void Taoist hurriedly said to the person beside him, "Fellow cultivator Bei Yu, you're the fastest among us. Therefore, I'll have to trouble you to go to the chaos beyond the heavens and ask Master from the Purple Cloud Palace. If they really start fighting, only my teacher can stop them in the untainted land." As soon as the great Void Taoist finished speaking, a handsome young man in white who was shrouded in coldness said, "The great Void Taoist is right. Brother Great Void, you're right. Only Master can stop this disaster. There's no time to lose. I'll go now." This person was Taoist Beiyu. His original body was an ice sculpture born in the north of the primordial world, an extremely cold place. He was formed by the Khanate cold wind and was a top Khanate god fiend in the primordial world. Unfortunately, compared to Taoist Kuan Peng, he was weaker. Therefore, he did not have the chance to become the Lord of the North Sea and missed a great opportunity. However, as a bird, although Taoist Beiyu's speed could not be compared to Mingyi's, it was far faster than most experts in the primordial world. It was most suitable for him to go to the chaos beyond the heavens. Screech! A white light flashed, and Taoist Beiyu's figure disappeared. He had already gone to the chaos beyond the heavens. Sigh. I hope fellow cultivator Beiyu can make it in time. After sighing, the great Void Taoist continued to look outside the netherworld realm with a worried expression. Please don't fight. In theory, the heavenly Tao could be said to be omniscient and omnipotent to the primordial world. However, there were always exceptions. For the saints, and the great divinities. Although the heavenly Tao had the power to destroy them, it could not pry into their thoughts. For example, the heavenly Tao could not know whether the 6 saints would fight with Hutu and the others. Because it could interfere with the saints' actions, but it could not affect their hearts. It had no way of knowing what the saints were thinking, nor could it deduce. This was the disadvantage of having no feelings. The complexity of the human heart. How could the heavenly Tao understand it? Therefore, at this time, Tao ancestor Hongjun needed to appear. Compared to the heavenly Tao, he understood the human heart better. Chapter 402. With Tao ancestor Hongjun around. The two sides would definitely not fight. Therefore, when the Grand Pure One unleashed his full strength, Tao ancestor Hongjun had already arrived. He quietly hid in the dark and watched the development of the situation. Otherwise, it would be too late to wait for Taoist Beiyu to go to the Purple Cloud Palace and invite him over. At this moment, outside the netherworld, it could be said that they had gathered the primordial world. The strongest power. 7 saints, 11 top-notch great divine abilities, 4 Khanate cardinal treasures, and 14 top-notch Khanate spirit treasures. It was the battle between the liches and demons. Its power was only a so, right? It was no wonder that those great divine abilities ran away without looking back when they saw that they were about to fight. Looking at this situation, who would dare to stay where they were? If they were not careful, they would be blasted into pieces and return to the origin of the world. Fellow Taoist Hutu, are you going to let me? Or not? With the Taiji painting above his head, the Grand Pure One issued a final ultimatum. Next. If the Hutu still did not agree, she was afraid that they would have to fight today. Empress, open the gates of hell and let them in. If we really enter the netherworld with the 6 paths of reincarnation disc, so what if the saints come? What waves can they cause? Just as the Hutu was about to retaliate, Feng Zichen suddenly sent a voice transmission to her. As the Lord of Samsara, the Hutu was an invincible existence in the netherworld. As long as the saints entered the netherworld, this matter would be considered over. However, Feng Zichen waited and waited, but he did not see the Hutu let anyone into the netherworld. Instead, he confronted her outside. This time he was anxious. Are you stupid? Hutu, are you stupid? It was clearly a matter that could be easily resolved. Why did it become like this? He felt helpless. Feng Zichen could only remind her. Hearing this, the Hutu could not help but be slightly stunned. That's right. Why did she have to fight with the 6 saints here? The Nether Realm, that was his territory. Over there, she was an invincible existence. As long as the saints entered, wouldn't they be at her mercy? He's really out of his mind. Thinking of this, Hutu couldn't help but laugh self-deprecatingly. She was so angry that she actually gave up on her biggest advantage and competed with him at a complete disadvantage. Then, Huta gave up the idea of fighting with the six sages and put away her magical power. The prehistoric geomancy map once again disappeared into the void, and the seal of Mount Buzhou also slowly disappeared. Fellow Taoists, you wish to preach in the netherworld? All right then. Huta couldn't ask for more. With that said, Huta smiled faintly and waved her hand to open the gate of hell. Then, she stepped aside and opened a path. Fellow Taoists, please. His tone was full of urgency and urging, as if he was worried that they would not come. His attitude changed so quickly that it left everyone dumbfounded. Hutu's sudden change not only stunned the six saints, but also the onlookers who were watching from the sidelines. Earlier, they had wanted to fight to the death. Why did Hutu suddenly give in? Moreover, she gave in so much that she almost gave the nether realm away. There was a trap. There was definitely a trap. For a moment, everyone fell into deep suspicion. Huta suddenly became so straightforward that the six saints couldn't help but hesitate. They were afraid that there was a trap and didn't dare to go forward easily. Why? When I asked you to come in, you insisted on coming in. Now that I've let you in, you're hesitating instead. What does this mean? Are you afraid? Seeing that the six saints didn't move for a long time, the smile on Hutu's face disappeared. Instead, she mocked them with a mocking expression. You? After being humiliated like this, the heavenly lord of primordial beginning was immediately furious. He raised the Pangu banner and was about to hit Hutu. Fellow Taoist Yu Qing, please stop. Seeing that Hutu had taken a step back and made things turn around, he didn't expect that the heavenly lord of primordial beginning would suddenly raise the Pangu banner. This wouldn't do. If he struck out with this strike, this battle would have to be fought. Therefore, the great divinities moved. They walked out of space and time. They stood in front of the six saints, separating them from the ancestral magi. Fellow Taoist, this matter has passed. You want to preach the Tao, and fellow Taoist Hutu has agreed. She even took the initiative to open the gate of the netherworld. It can be said that she has made the biggest concession. Even so, you still want to do that? Could it be that you want fellow Taoist Hutu to take the initiative to offer the origin of the netherworld before you are willing to give up? In front of the Grand Pure One, the Great Void Taoist said with some displeasure. The saint had gone too far in this matter. Even these great divinities couldn't stand it anymore. They couldn't help but come forward to make peace. And who was the Great Void Taoist? He was a powerful person who could cultivate to the great perfection of the sage to be realm by relying on his own hard work. He even touched a trace of the true essence of the primordial chaos Tao realm. One could tell that his background was not inferior to the three pure ones and the others. This kind of person was not far from the legendary primordial chaos Daluo Jingxian realm. Perhaps one day, when the opportunity came, it would be done. Therefore, his attitude. Even the Grand Pure One had to pay attention to it. Even if they didn't care about his attitude, the weight of the great divinities present was enough to move them. They were the 3,000 guests of the mortal world. Among the many connate god-fiends of the primordial world, the 3,000 top ones all had the aura of primordial chaos. If they offended all of them, they would be in big trouble in the future. Fellow Taoist, please calm down. We were too rash. The Grand Pure One took back the Taiji painting and apologized. Fellow Taoist Hutu, Poor Wei and the others have offended you today. Please forgive us. After speaking to everyone, the Grand Pure One said to the Hutu apologetically. Humph. Fellow Taoist Grand Pure One, is there anything else? If there's nothing else, then leave. The netherworld is too small to accommodate great gods like you. With a cold snort, the Hutu began to chase them away. Originally, becoming a saint was a joyous occasion, but they had ruined it. How could the Hutu not be angry? Fellow Taoist Hutu, what do you want for you to agree to let Poor Wei and the others preach the Tao in the netherworld? As if he didn't hear the Hutu's words, the Grand Pure One continued to ask. Obviously, he had not given up on the netherworld. This was a mission given to them by the heavenly Tao. If they could not complete it, who knew what would happen? Therefore, even if there was a slight possibility, the Grand Pure One was unwilling to give up. Originally, the birth of the 6 paths of reincarnation should have evolved according to the will of the heavenly Tao. However, with the interference of Pangu's will, everything had nothing to do with him. The heavenly Tao was completely excluded. The number one treasure in the primordial world had nothing to do with the heavenly Tao. That was fine. After all, Pangu had interfered. However, as the netherworld, which was the death world of the primordial world, was not under his control. This was intolerable. Therefore, no matter what, he wanted to get involved in the netherworld and put the netherworld under his sight. Chapter 403. Conditions. No. The entrance to the netherworld is there. If you want to enter, the Hutu will definitely not stop you. Pointing at the open gate of hell, the Hutu said indifferently. Fellow Taoist Hutu, stop joking. If you don't agree, the poor Wei and the others will never dare to step into the netherworld. Shaking his head helplessly, the Grand Pure One replied with a bitter smile. Outside the netherworld, the 6 of them joined forces. The Hutu was definitely no match for them. However, if they entered the netherworld, it would be the complete opposite. They were definitely no match for the Hutu. Therefore, this netherworld, they could not enter. Then there's nothing I can do. The Hutu understood that the heavenly Tao entering the netherworld was a general trend. It could not be stopped. Even the tunnel would not stop it. Because the heavenly Tao was the true controller of the primordial world. As a part of the primordial world, the netherworld naturally could not escape the control of the heavenly Tao. This was the inevitable outcome. Even if the Hutu did not agree now, it would definitely happen in the future. Therefore, her resistance at this moment was actually meaningless. However, the Hutu was naturally unwilling to let the saint interfere just like that. Therefore, she planned to stop the saint appropriately so that she could gain some benefits from it to make up for her losses. Since she could not stop the general trend, she would think of a way to gain some benefits. This was not too much. It was what she should do. She could not let the Hutu suffer, right? But she did not expect that the saint would be so domineering. After coming to the netherworld, he directly forced the Hutu with a tough attitude. It was as if he would suppress her if she did not agree. How could the Hutu tolerate it? No matter who it was, they wouldn't be able to tolerate it. Therefore, the Hutu was angry. He didn't care about the plan anymore. He just went head-on with the sage. In the hearts of the 6 saints, they were also filled with regret. The reason why they were so strong was that they did not want to pay an excessive price. They planned to use forceful methods to force the Hutu to agree. This way, they would save a lot of benefits. But who knew that they were strong, and the Hutu was even stronger. She looked like she was going to fight to the death. Tao ancestor Hong Jun, who was hiding in the dark, could not help but shake his head when he saw this. It was originally a simple matter that could be solved by paying a price, but because of their greed, it became complicated. Now, even if they wanted to take a step back, Hutu would not easily agree. Otherwise, if word of this got out, wouldn't people say that Hutu was afraid of the 6 saints? This was a great humiliation in the untainted land. Anyone who cared about their reputation would not tolerate it. Therefore, if he didn't give Hutu a way out to save her face, there was no possibility of success. However, even so, Tao ancestor Hong Jun understood the Grand Pure One and the others. If the heavenly Tao wanted to interfere in the netherworld, he could have just given Hutu some benefits, but he did not. He insisted on having the saints step forward and bear the price for him. This was a pretty good plan. The benefits were his while the losses were the saints. He had obtained the nether realm without paying anything. However, saints were not to be trifled with. If they really listened to the heavenly Tao, there would not be so much chaos in the primordial world. In addition, the things of the saints did not fall from the sky. They would definitely not be willing to contribute to the heavenly Tao for free. Therefore, this matter was naturally messed up. Sigh. In the end, I still have to do it myself. Tao ancestor Hong Jun sighed helplessly and decided to do it himself. Although he had long guessed that the saints were unreliable, Hong Jun did not expect them to be so unreliable. Just looking at the series of actions of the 6 saints, not only did they not solve the problem, they even made the problem more complicated. Tao ancestor Hong Jun had reason to suspect that the 6 saints did it on purpose. Otherwise, how could they be so stupid? He knew his disciples very well. They were all smart people, and each of them was more scheming than the other. They would never do such a stupid thing. However, none of this was important. What was important was to solve the problem in front of him. Bas. Tao ancestor Hong Jun took out the creation jade disc and connected it to the heavenly Tao. From the endless future, he looked for a chance to break the situation. Since the heavenly Tao entering the netherworld was the general trend, there was naturally a corresponding condition to promote this process. What Tao ancestor Hong Jun was doing now was to find this condition. In a trance, Tao ancestor Hong Jun saw a figure. It was the person who broke the situation. This person, he was somewhat familiar. It was his grand disciple, the 9 heavens immortal venerables, Xianxia. I see. Tao ancestor Hong Jun understood in his heart. He pointed at the Grand Pure One and gave him a hint. It was better for the saint to appear. That's Xianxia. Why is he here? The Grand Pure One glanced from the corner of his eye and actually saw Xianxia's figure in the netherworld. He could not help but be shocked. When did he run in? It was when Hutu turned into reincarnation. In order to freeload off the merit of reincarnation, Xianxia used the White Lotus of Purification to help Hutu purify the Sea of Blood and awaken her. After that, he never left. The Sea of Blood was swallowed by the netherworld, so he naturally appeared in the netherworld. It was just that he was too weak and was ignored by everyone. Now the Grand Pure One had obtained the help of Tao ancestor Hong Jun and, accidentally, discovered him. Xianxia, why are you here? The Grand Pure One asked directly with doubts in his heart. Huh? Xianxia? He's here too. As soon as the Grand Pure One finished speaking, Xianxia immediately became the focus of attention, attracting everyone's attention. Hiss! Being stared at by so many great divine abilities, Xianxia felt uncomfortable all over. To be honest, among all the people present, he was the weakest, the lowest in seniority. Those great divine abilities were all big shots of the celestial sect of wonders. According to seniority, they were all his uncle masters. At this moment, Xianxia felt that he was extremely humble. It was too miserable. Reporting to Uncle Master. Bracing himself, Xianxia stood up and told him what had happened previously. Haha. Good, that's great. After hearing Xianxia's words, the Grand Pure One suddenly laughed out loud. He had already thought of a solution. Fellow Taoist Hutu, Poor Wei's disciple nephew is fated with the netherworld. Therefore, Poor Wei and the others plan to help disciple nephew Xianxia set up a courtyard in the netherworld to teach the great Tao of the celestial sect of wonders. I hope fellow Taoist Hutu can help. As he spoke, the Grand Pure One bowed to the Hutu. He really did not expect that Xianxia would actually contribute when the Hutu turned into reincarnation. This was a huge favor. With this as a breakthrough point and a price to pay, it was difficult for the Hutu not to agree. Moreover, even if this matter was spread out, the Hutu would agree to teach them in the netherworld in order to return the favor. It was not that she was afraid of the 6 saints and was forced to agree. Chapter 404. When he heard this, he couldn't help but hesitate in his heart. Even her attitude was not as firm as before. Originally, according to her plan, no matter what the saints said, she would not agree. However, when it came to Xianxia, this matter was different. The Lady of Earth had not forgotten that it was Xianxia who activated the White Lotus of Purification. Only then could she comprehend the meaning of reincarnation from the destruction of the lotus. It could be said that she had transformed into reincarnation. She had been enlightened by Xianxia. That was a huge favor. If Xianxia wanted to establish a Tao orthodoxy in the netherworld, the Lady of Earth would not be able to refuse. It was precisely because he thought of this that the Grand Pure One said that he wanted to use Xianxia's name to preach in the netherworld. In this way, the Lady of Earth could neither agree nor disagree. She could not help but fall into a dilemma. If she agreed, she would definitely feel uncomfortable. If she did not agree, how could she repay the karma she owed Xianxia? Fellow Taoist Lady of Earth, if you agree to this, the Poor Wei and the others will each owe you a favor. Just as the Lady of Earth was in a dilemma, the Grand Pure One continued to speak. It was the Grand Pure One who saw the Lady of Earth's hesitation and thought that there was a chance. He hurriedly promised great benefits and did not hesitate to use a favor as the price to exchange for her consent. The favor of a saint. How precious was that? That was equivalent to 6 wishes. As long as it did not exceed their abilities, regardless of whether it was reasonable or not, they could not refuse. They had to satisfy it. If these 6 favors landed in the Lady of Earth's hands, she could completely rely on them to ask the saint to do 6 things for her unconditionally as long as it was within her abilities. From this, it could be seen that in order to get the Lady of Earth to agree to them preaching in the Netherworld Saint, the saint had also put in a lot of effort. Sure. However, I am indebted to Xianxia. He can preach in the Netherworld, but you can't. He knew that at this point, he had no reason to refuse. He might as well stop while he was ahead. Hence, the Lady of Earth nodded in agreement. At the same time, in order to prevent the saint from causing trouble, she added a restriction. Sure. It was not easy to get the Lady of Earth to agree. Facing her request, the Grand Pure One did not disagree. He smiled and nodded. As long as he could plant a nail in the Netherworld and give the Heavenly Tao a reason to interfere, everything would be fine. As for whether or not the nails were them, that was not important. Xianxia was speechless when he saw the few of them decide his future with just a few words. Looking at their attitude, they completely treated him, the person involved, as if he didn't exist. WOC. Can't you ask for his opinion? He was standing right next to her. Even if he couldn't make the decision, it wouldn't be difficult to pretend to ask for his opinion, right? That's true. In front of the elders, there was no room for Xianxia to speak. He just needed to listen to the arrangements. Xianxia disciple, after a discussion with your 2 uncle masters and 3 uncle masters, we've decided to let you build an alternative residence in the Netherworld realm so that you can impart the supreme Tao of Xianmen and enlighten everyone. If that's the case, are you willing? In the end, it was Tong Tian who felt sorry for his disciple. He turned his head and asked Xianxia. This disciple is willing. For the celestial sect of wonders, I will go through fire and water without hesitation. Without the slightest hesitation, Xianxia said righteously. This was related to the plan of the heavenly axiom, and it had been negotiated by the 6 sages. How could Xianxia refuse? Wasn't that courting death? Did he still want to survive in the primordial world? Moreover, the sage was not asking for Xianxia's opinion. Instead, he was informing him in advance so that he could be prepared and not be flustered. Therefore, Xianxia could not refuse, nor did he dare to refuse. Moreover, preaching in the Netherworld was beneficial to Xianxia. Other than being forced by others, there was nothing wrong with it. Since that was the case, there was no reason for him to refuse. Since he could not refuse, he might as well act more straightforwardly to gain everyone's favor. Alright. Only by being so responsible can you live up to the name of the celestial venerables of the celestial sect of wonders. Sure enough, seeing Xianxia's attitude, the 6 sages nodded in satisfaction. Xianxia, take this item and open up a pure land in the Netherworld as the foundation for preaching. He took out a ball of heaven and earth origin. With a wave of his hand, the Grand Pure One sent it into the hands of Xianxia in the Netherworld. Immediately after, the other 5 sages also took out a ball of heaven and earth origin and sent it to Xianxia. Preaching in the Netherworld was the collective mission of the 6 sages. Naturally, it was impossible for the Grand Pure One to do it alone. All of the losses should be shared by everyone. Heaven and earth origin. The true foundation of the primordial world. It was more precious and miraculous than the Xianhuang merit. It could help people become Daluo Jingxian, evolve the world, and also give birth to innate god fiends. It had incredible uses. Even if the sages wanted to condense such a treasure, they would not be able to condense it without 10,000 years. The ball of heaven and earth origin in Xianxing's hands was the result of the sages' accumulation for countless years. Even if they took it out, their hearts would ache. Evolving the world. Xianxia muttered to himself as he merged the 6 balls of heaven and earth origin in front of him into one. The 6 sages gave him the heaven and earth origin so that he could evolve a completely different upper-class world in the Netherworld. A world that belonged to the living. That's right, this was the sage's goal. The extreme of death was life. Opening up the world of life in the death realm was in accordance with this principle. There were great opportunities, great luck, and great creation. It had indescribable benefits for preaching in the future. Open. Thinking of the legends of the later generations, Xianxia used his magic power to activate the heaven and earth origin and began to evolve the world. Suddenly, a terrifying power spread. Endless light erupted, and endless laws were born, covering everything. Nothing could be seen. After 100 years, the violent fluctuations finally stopped, and the endless light also faded. An upper-class world with endless vitality surrounded by green light gradually appeared in the netherworld and appeared in front of everyone. The Eastern Green Flower World of Perpetual Joy. It was the name of this world, and it was also the residence of the Eastern Green Flower Emperor. Xianxia used this as the foundation to evolve this world. Rumble. The Eastern Green Flower World of Perpetual Joy was born, and there was a sudden change in the netherworld. Boundless deathly aura was boiling, and it caused huge waves. Vitality was born from the deathly aura and rushed toward the Eastern Green Flower World of Perpetual Joy. Qinghua in the first place had the meaning of life. Now, a world full of vitality suddenly appeared in the netherworld. It was very eye-catching in the vast deathly aura. Naturally, it caused the vitality hidden in the deathly aura to resonate and gather toward the Eastern Green Flower World of Perpetual Joy. Rumble. Violent changes occurred in the Eastern Green Flower World of Perpetual Joy. The vitality became more and more intense, and countless strange flowers and plants were born. It released all kinds of strange phenomena. And at the bottom of the Azure Flower World, the newly born spiritual soil also began to mutate after absorbing a large amount of vitality. It released a green treasure light. Countless Tao patterns were born, and the essence of vitality rolled out, shaking the surroundings. Hiss! What rich essence of vitality! It's not an exaggeration to say that this world is the world of life. Outside the netherworld, even the knowledgeable powerful beings were shocked by this tyrannical fluctuation of vitality. They had seen many upper-class worlds. As long as they were willing to spend some time, they could even create an upper-class world that was not inferior to the Azure Flower World. However, it was the first time they had seen a world like the Azure Flower World of Perpetual Joy that was completely composed of vitality, and they could not create it. This was the world of life in the death realm. Just like the young pole in the Een fish, it was the truth of heaven and earth. It could be encountered but not sought. It was formed by various coincidences, and it was a supreme opportunity. It was too difficult to replicate. Because in the primordial world, there was no longer a netherworld. The heaven realm and the netherworld. They were both unique. Boom! At this moment, a sudden change occurred. The vitality that spread out finally attracted the rebound of the death aura. The vast death aura surged and surged towards the Eastern Green Flower World of Perpetual Joy. Although the Eastern Green Flower World of Perpetual Joy was large, compared to the netherworld, it was like a wave in the sea. It could not be compared at all. In an instant, it was drowned by the surging death aura. If it were not for the vitality that still emerged from the netherworld and constantly merged into the Azure Flower World to fight against the death aura, the entire Azure Flower World would have been swallowed by the death aura. But even so, the Azure Flower World was still in danger. How could those strands of vitality compare to the boundless aura of death? It was just a dying struggle. It would not be long before the Azure Flower World became history and completely merged into the death aura. This was the calamity of the world, or rather, the calamity of splitting the sky. It was a calamity that belonged to the world. The birth of every world, while containing great fortune and great opportunities, was often accompanied by great calamities. Not to mention a world like the Azure Flower World, which was completely composed of vitality, must be extremely heaven-defying. The power of the calamity of the world that it triggered was also terrifying and astonishing. The riot of the netherworld's death aura was his calamity. If he passed it, he would survive. If he couldn't pass it, he would be destroyed. This is too strong. Seeing the boundless death aura, Xianxia clicked his tongue in fear. If he had not seen something wrong and had avoided far away the moment the death aura erupted, he would probably have ended up like the Azure Flower World, struggling in the death aura. Purifying White Lotus, go! Although he was afraid, the Eastern Green Flower World of Perpetual Joy was related to the scheme of the Heavenly Tao and his future path. He could not give up. He had to think of a way to help it survive the calamity of the world. Therefore, after some thought, Xianxia took out the 12th grade Purifying White Lotus. This was the strongest magic treasure on him, and at the same time, it was his strongest method. If it was useless, he really had no other way. However, Xianxia knew very well that he would not fail. The so-called calamity of the world was just a formality. It was scary but not dangerous. The eastern green flower world of perpetual joy was born according to the will of the heavenly Tao. It was his method to interfere with the netherworld. If this world was destroyed, all the previous efforts of the heavenly Tao would be in vain. If that was the case, how could the heavenly Tao allow it? The birth of this world was inevitable. Xianxia obeyed the orders of the heavens. How could he fail? Chapter 405. After the white lotus of purification left Xianxia, it expanded with the wind. In the blink of an eye, it became 10,000 feet in size. Its entire body emitted a white glow as it spun. It broke through layers of deathly aura and landed in the world of everlasting joy of the East, taking root in its origin. Boom! The origin of the greater world was extremely powerful. Even the weakest one was stronger than Daluo Jingxian. Not to mention, for a top-tier greater world like the world of everlasting joy of the East, its origin was definitely not weaker than the great Abhijna. Hence, under the influence of the world's origin, the power of the grade 12 white lotus of purification was completely unleashed. The light of purification swept out like flowing water, enveloping everything. As a result, the surrounding space was illuminated into a vast expanse of whiteness. Sizzle! With the protection of the white lotus of purification, the world of everlasting joy of the East stabilized instantly. The deathly aura came into contact with it again. Before it could get close, it was purified by the light of purification that enveloped it. The white lotus of purification could purify all the filthy aura in the world. The deathly aura was also a type of filthy aura. It could not escape its purification. After the deathly aura was purified, it turned into the purest origin aura and integrated into the growing world of everlasting joy of the East to accelerate its evolution. This was also one of the abilities of the white lotus of purification. Otherwise, why would it be called one of the 10 great primordial spiritual treasures of the primordial world? Very good. As expected of the celestial sect of wonders. In the dark, Elder Hongjun saw this scene and nodded his head in satisfaction. This grand disciple was much more reliable than the sages. It was all thanks to him that they were able to complete the task entrusted by the heavenly axiom. If not for him, it would be troublesome this time. Reward. Great reward. Thinking of Xianxing's contributions, Elder Hongjun made a decision in his heart. He was going to record his contributions and reward him well. As the leader of the celestial sect of wonders, he naturally had to treat those who contributed well so that the disciples of the celestial sect of wonders would not be disappointed. Let the poor way see what is fated with you? Elder Hongjuan's heart skipped a beat. Endless heavenly secrets appeared and surged in his sea of consciousness. Everything related to Xianxia appeared. The best was not the most suitable. But the most suitable was definitely the best. As the number one god of the primordial world, Hongjun naturally understood that. Therefore, he wanted to know everything about Xianxia so that he could choose the most suitable treasure for Xianxia. Luckily, Pangu covered up all the secrets of heaven on Feng Zichen, including his connection with Xianxia. Dao ancestor Hongjun was the strongest, but he couldn't compare to Pangu, so he couldn't see through him. This allowed Feng Zichen to escape a calamity. Green Lotus of Creation? This kid is so lucky. In just an instant, ancestor Hongjun learned everything that Xianxia had experienced and understood what he needed the most now. The four-sided lotus platform. The innate 5 elements flag. With these 9 top-notch connate merit numinous treasures, he managed to nurture the 36-grade green lotus of creation. However, it was a pity that he would never be able to gather all 9 innate merit spiritual treasures. Heavenly Tao. He would not let the rank 36 creation green lotus appear in the great desolate Aeon. However, a connate treasure level green lotus of creation can exist. It won't touch the bottom line of the heavenly Tao. This kid's idea is very good. Xianxia wanted to collect the origins of the 9 connate spirit treasures and use them to grow the green lotus of creation. Naturally, he couldn't hide it from Hongjun. Regarding this, he expressed his agreement. If it was done properly, it might be possible to cultivate a connate treasure level green lotus of creation. However, this method was too difficult. Forget it. After all, he is the grand disciple of Poor Wei, and he has contributed to the celestial sect of wonders. Poor Wei will help him. As for whether it succeeds or not, it all depends on his own luck. He remembered that he didn't give him any gifts when he entered the sect of Xianxia. In addition, he had made a great contribution to the celestial sect of wonders today. Tao ancestor Hongjun made a decision in his heart. He planned to combine the two rewards and give Xianxia a great creation. I'll give you this western white cloud-bound flag. It's not in vain for you to call poor Wei Grandmaster. Tao ancestor Hongjun waved his hand and took out a white flag. There were cloud patterns embroidered on it, and it was surrounded by Connate Gungjin Qi. It was the western white cloud-bound flag of the Connate five-element flags. It was a supreme-grade Connate merit spirit treasure, one of the 10 great Connate spirit treasures of the primordial world. This treasure should have been given to the Jade Pool Golden Mother by Tao ancestor Hongjun after the witch-demon calamity. It should have turned into the immortal gathering flag and was one of the treasures of the heavenly courts. However, from what he meant just now, he clearly wanted to give this item to Xianxia to help him cultivate the green lotus of creation. History had really changed. Go! With a casual toss, Tao ancestor Hongjun threw the western white cloud-bound flag out. It turned into a stream of light and broke through layers of void, flying to Xianxia. What is it? Xianxia, who was paying attention to the changes in the eastern Qinghua world of Chang'e, suddenly saw a stream of light flash in front of him. He subconsciously reached out to grab it. This is the western white cloud-bound flag. The stream of light immediately turned into a small white flag. Xianxia glanced at it and felt that it was very familiar. After thinking carefully for a while, he could not help but exclaim. He had already come into contact with 3 of the Connate five-element flags. Naturally, he was no stranger to their aura. How could he not recognize the origin of the small flag in his hand? It was the western white cloud-bound flag that he had no hope for. This treasure was in the hands of Tao ancestor Hongjun. Xianxia could not come into contact with it at all, let alone extract a wisp of Connate origin. However, what was unexpected was that Xianxia had already given up hope. This treasure actually appeared in his hands on its own initiative. What a pleasant surprise! Grand Disciple Xianxia thanks the ancestral master. After putting away the western white cloud-bound flag, Xianxia hurriedly bowed to the void. It was obvious that this treasure must have been given to him by Tao ancestor Hongjun. It should be a reward for his actions this time. There's no need to thank me. You deserve it. Before Xianxia could bow, a voice suddenly sounded in his ears. Even so, Xianxia still insisted on bowing. Seeing this, Tao ancestor Hongjun did not stop him. After waiting for a while, Xianxia relaxed when he did not hear any sound. I've really earned a lot today. Touching the treasure flag in his hand, Xianxia still could not hide the excitement in his heart. The green lotus of creation was about to be formed. It's just that this item is the supreme treasure of the heavenly court. If I take it, will I be tainted with karma? In the end, thinking of the significance of this treasure in the future, Xianxia could not help but be a little worried. The immortal gathering flag. As the name implied, he knew the function of this treasure. There was definitely a great karma. But immediately, he seemed to have thought of something and put it behind his mind. This treasure was given to him by Tao ancestor Hongjun. Even if there was any karma, it should be counted on him. What did it have to do with him? Moreover, as the Tao ancestor of the celestial sect of wonders, the #1 expert in the world, the most ancient living being of the primordial world, he would not cheat a junior and give him a problematic spirit treasure, right? Chapter 406. Hongjun was now a Tao ancestor. He was no longer the top great medium of the primitive world. His status was obviously different. He wouldn't do the same thing as before, right? No. Absolutely not. After cheering himself up, Xianxia turned his attention back to the eastern Qinghua Chang'e world. At this point, he could only believe in the character of Tao ancestor Hongjun. After all, if the Tao ancestor really wanted to cheat him, he had no other choice but to accept it silently. The gap in strength was too big. With the protection of the pure white lotus, the eastern Qinghua Chang'e world gradually gained a foothold in the netherworld. Not only did the death aura not do anything to him, but it also became the nourishment for his evolution. Very good. However, it's not enough. Nodding his head, Xianxia was very satisfied with the performance of the pure white lotus. But he was not satisfied with the evolution of the Qinghua Chang'e world. Unlike the 18 levels of hell, this was a greater thousand world that he opened up on his own. Therefore, it was not supported by the will of the netherworld. There were all kinds of difficulties in opening it up. It was not as fast as the 18 levels of hell. Even with the help of the origin of heaven and earth, it was still the same. Go. With a thought, Xianxia took out the white cloud boundary flag and waved it at the boundless death aura. Whoosh! Suddenly, a bright white light bloomed, and the connate Gungjin Qi surged out. One after another, it crushed the death aura that was rushing toward the Qinghua Chang'e world. After the death aura was crushed, it was directly absorbed and purified by the pure white lotus. It saved the time of entanglement, and the speed of the Qinghua Chang'e world's development was greatly accelerated. It's useful. Seeing this, Xianxia's eyes lit up. He simply threw the white cloud boundary flag into the Qinghua Chang'e world and let him and the pure white lotus work together. Boom boom boom. The 12th grade pure white lotus and the white cloud boundary flag met, and the two seemed to have reached a resonance. The power suddenly increased, and a dazzling light burst out. The terrifying power spread and covered everything. Under this power, the arrogant death aura completely became the nourishment for the growth of the Qinghua Chang'e world, and it could no longer cause any harm. At this time, with the right time, place and people, it is the best time for the green lotus of creation to appear. If I miss this opportunity, who knows when I'll have to wait for the next one. Taking out the green lotus of good fortune, Xianxia had a strong premonition that it was time for the green lotus of good fortune to appear. They had arrived. Among the 4 innate great lotus platforms, Xianxia only lacked the innate origin of the grade 12 red lotus of hellfire. Among the innate 5-element flags, the only thing he lacked was the innate origin of the northern Shenyuan water control flag. These 2 treasures were in the hands of Taoist Mingi. And Taoist Styx was in the nether realm, not far from him. At this moment, if Xianxia were to ask Taoist Mingi for Air Bao's congenital origin in the name of developing the Qinghua Chang'e world, he would definitely not refuse. Because he was Taoist Styx River. He had once heard of it in the Purple Cloud Palace. No matter what he thought, he was still a disciple of the celestial sect of wonders in the untainted land. This was the birth of the Qinghua Everlasting Joy realm, and it was related to the celestial sect's plan. There was no way that Taoist Mingi could refuse. Previously, when the 6 saints and the Lady of Earth were fighting, it was understandable that he did not help. Now, this was something that he could do in passing. If he were to refuse, it would be equivalent to cutting himself off from the celestial sect of wonders. The 6 saints would definitely have a grudge against him. In this way, as long as Taoist Mingi was not stupid, he would know how to choose. The witch race was different from the demon race. They really had nothing to do with the celestial sect of wonders. Among the 12 ancestral witches, other than ancestral witch Hutu who had been there once, the rest had never been there. Uncle Master Mingi, Xianxia would like to ask for 2 treasures from you to help the Qinghua Chang'e world evolve. I hope you can fulfill my request. Holding the green lotus of good fortune in his hand, Xianxia bowed to Taoist Mingi and said, if he wanted to ask for help, he had to have the attitude of asking for help. Xianxia was well aware of this. Sigh. Take it. Seeing the green lotus of good fortune, Taoist Mingi felt that the secrets of heaven were clear. Without Xianxia saying anything, he knew what Xianxia wanted. After struggling for a while, Taoist Mingi took out a lotus seed of the red lotus of fire and threw it to Xianxia together with the congenital origin of the northern mystic water control flag. He was not afraid of offending 1 or 2 saints, but offending 6 at the same time. Even the East Emperor Tai had to think twice. He, Mingi, naturally did not dare to. Therefore, he could not refuse Xianxia's request. They're finally here. After receiving the red lotus of fire and the congenital origin, Xianxia's face could not help but reveal an ecstatic expression. He had gathered one of the congenital origins of the 9 treasures of good fortune. The green lotus of good fortune could finally be born. This was all thanks to Pangu. If Pangu had not made a move and prevented the heavenly Tao from interfering with the netherworld, it would not have borrowed Xianxia's hand to evolve the Qinghua Chang'e world. And the birth of the green lotus of good fortune could speed up the birth of the Qinghua Chang'e world. In this way, Even if the heavenly Tao did not like the green lotus of good fortune, in order to control the netherworld, it had to be born and would not send down the heavenly punishment. This was called the right time. The eastern Qinghua Chengel world was a boundless world composed of boundless vitality. It gathered most of the vitality of the netherworld. It could be said to be the holy land of spiritual root living beings. It was most suitable for the growth of the green lotus of good fortune. This was called the right place. The Tao ancestor came in person, the 6 saints came together, and the great magicians of the celestial sect gathered. This was called the harmony of people. All these things added together made it the best time for the green lotus of good fortune to be born. If he missed this time, it would be difficult for him to encounter a second time in his life. Thank you, Uncle Master Mingi. I will definitely repay you generously in the future for helping me. After calming down from the ecstasy, Xianxia thanked Taoist Mingi. Just based on Taoist Mingi's actions today, if Xianxia had great achievements in the future and the Buddhist sect schemed against Taoist Mingi, he would definitely help to repay today's kindness. You're welcome. It's all for the celestial sect of wonders. Taoist Mingi waved his hand and replied expressionlessly. This was really for the celestial sect of wonders. If it wasn't for the celestial sect of wonders, he wouldn't have given the red lotus seed and the congenital origin to others. As for the generous repayment that Xianxia mentioned, Taoist Mingi didn't care at all. If it was his master, the Grand Master of Heaven, who said it, it would be fine. He was just a junior. What ability could he have? Hee. Xianxia smiled and didn't say anything. He had roughly guessed what Taoist Mingi meant. But so what? Everything would be revealed in the future. Go. Xianxia formed a Tao seal and sent the green lotus of good fortune and the origin of the 9 treasures of good fortune that he had collected earlier into the eastern Qinghua Chengel world so that they could fuse there. Buzz buzz buzz. Sensing the aura of the same origin on the green lotus of good fortune, the white lotus of purification and the white cloud-bound flag trembled inexplicably and released wisps of origin that gathered towards him. Chapter 407. In the depths of the eastern world of everlasting joy, a 9-colored brilliance bloomed. The creation chi surged and the laws of great Tao filled the air. It was abnormally mystical. That was the phenomenon caused by the growth of the creation green lotus. An extraordinary object would definitely have an extraordinary appearance. Needless to say, the creation green lotus was extraordinary. Even though it was only a connate numinous treasure, it still had boundless power. Even heaven and earth had to celebrate its rebirth. The 9-colored light was formed by the origins of the 4 connate lotus platforms and the connate 5 elements flag. It enveloped the creation green lotus and deduced the origin of creation. It explained the true meaning of the great Tao and helped it take root. Before long, the connate origins of the creation 9 treasures were completely absorbed by the creation green lotus. As for the creation green lotus, it also grew into a lotus flower. A green lotus flower. That was the creation green lotus. The 3 treasures. No, one of the 4 chaos cardinal treasures. The creation green lotus. It was the cardinal treasure in Panga's hands and also the strongest spirit root in the world. It was even stronger than the world tree. However, the grade 36 creation green lotus was completely destroyed. Even if it could be reproduced, it was not something that Xianxia could do now. Therefore, the creation green lotus that was born from the creation green lotus was only grade 12. It was a supreme grade connate numinous treasure and not even a connate cardinal treasure. It was of the same level as the other 4 lotus platforms and was not much stronger. A supreme grade connate numinous treasure? In that case, it's not beyond my expectations. Looking at the grade 12 creation green lotus in front of him, Xianxia had already guessed it. However, he could not help but be disappointed when he saw it for himself. The creation 9 treasures that Xianxia obtained was not the main body after all. It was a connate origin and its power was limited. It was already very good that it could nurture a grade 12 creation green lotus. However, humans were often dissatisfied. They always hoped for the best and not the best. When the results deviated from the expectations in one's heart, disappointment was inevitable. However, in the blink of an eye, Xianxia adjusted his mentality and destroyed the disappointment in his heart. The grade 12 creation green lotus was already very good. In the primordial world, there were only a few that could be compared to it. It was second only to connate cardinal treasures. Moreover, it didn't matter if it wasn't a connate cardinal treasure. He still had the 12th grade pure white lotus and the western white cloud-bound flag. As long as it swallowed the 2 supreme grade connate spirit treasures and combined the power of the 3 supreme grade connate spirit treasures, the 12th grade green lotus of creation would naturally be upgraded to a connate cardinal treasure. If that was the case, why should he be disappointed? The creation green lotus was destined to become a connate cardinal treasure and all the conditions were met. The only thing he lacked was the right timing. Once the time was right, he would succeed. Unfortunately, this was not the time to upgrade the green lotus of creation. The heavenly Tao could tolerate the existence of a supreme grade connate numinous treasure green lotus of creation, but it might not be able to tolerate the existence of a connate cardinal treasure green lotus of creation. Referring to the predecessor of the green lotus of creation, it was split by the 3 pure ones. Therefore, Xianxia decided not to advance under the eyes of the heavenly Tao to avoid unnecessary trouble. One day, he would find an opportunity to head to the great chaos outer realm. Only then would it be safe to advance there. After all, the outer realm was the true home of the green lotus of creation. Only there could he receive the best treatment. If he stayed in the primordial world, he would only be endlessly feared by the heavenly Tao. He would be in danger of being destroyed at any time. Moreover, referring to the chaos bead, he had completed his advancement in the great chaos outer realm and become a chaos numinous treasure, not a connate cardinal treasure. The green lotus of creation, which was in the same situation as him, should be able to receive the same treatment. Compared to a connate cardinal treasure, a chaos numinous treasure was still stronger. It was not strength in terms of power, but strength in essence. The evolution of the great Tao was the process of going from simple to complicated. As time passed, the great Tao would become more and more complicated and produce endless mysteries. But at the same time, it would also become more and more difficult to comprehend. Therefore, the closer it was to the initial era, the simpler the great Tao rules were. The closer it was to the essence of the great Tao, the easier it was to comprehend. A chaos numinous treasure appeared before a connate cardinal treasure. It was definitely older than a connate cardinal treasure and closer to the essence of the great Tao. Xianxia expressed that he did not know who was stronger between the two and did not dare to make a judgment. However, he knew one thing. Under the same talent, a person with a chaos numinous treasure would definitely cultivate faster than a person with a connate cardinal treasure. One was close to the essence of the great Tao, while the other was on the surface of the great Tao. The difference was extremely obvious. The older, the more powerful. It was not a joke. At the end of the realm, all divine abilities, magic treasures, and magic powers were useless. What was competing was one's control of the great Tao. At this time, the advantage of ancient living beings was reflected. They were closer to the essence of the great Tao than the living beings born later. Naturally, their cultivation was faster. This was the reason why connate god fiends were far less powerful than chaos fiend gods. Born a generation later, he missed out on too much. The later they were born, the more difficult it was to cultivate. The Tao at the beginning was 1, it was naturally easy to comprehend. After that, Tao was 2, 3 and all things. The difficulty of cultivation could be imagined. The birth of the green lotus of creation was celebrated by heaven and earth, and all kinds of phenomena were born. Above the 9 heavens, there was auspicious aura descending. Under the ground, golden light surged out. Together, it surged towards the green lotus of creation. This was the blessing of heaven and earth to the green lotus of creation. The green lotus of creation had contributed greatly to the birth of the primordial world. Now that it had been reborn, boundless benefits would naturally descend. In a place where no one could notice, the heaven-opening luck that dissipated between heaven and earth slowly waved towards the green lotus of creation and blessed it. Such a change could be hidden from others, but it could not be hidden from Xianxia. Seeing this, he was naturally overjoyed. The more heaven-opening luck, the greater the hope of attaining the Tao. How could he not be happy? However, while he was happy, he could not help but feel worried. There was a limit to the heaven-opening luck. How much luck could there be that dissipated between heaven and earth back then? Most of the heaven-opening luck was still left on some heaven-opening artifacts. In addition to absorbing the heaven-opening luck that dissipated between heaven and earth, the green lotus of creation could also absorb the heaven-opening luck of others. For example, the connate 4 great lotus platforms, the connate 5 element flags. These connate spirit treasures formed from the fragments of the green lotus of creation. The heaven-opening luck originally belonged to the green lotus of creation. It was only after it shattered that it was scattered on these connate spirit treasures. But now, the green lotus of creation was reborn, so the heaven-opening luck naturally had to be taken back. It was just that its level was too low now, and the heaven-opening luck it could absorb was limited. That was why it did not attract the attention of others. However, once the green lotus of creation advanced, it could accommodate more heaven-opening luck. The owners of those treasures of creation were not fools. Naturally, they would find the reason why the luck of the treasures of creation disappeared for no reason. With their intelligence, they would definitely not be able to hide it. Sooner or later, they would find the green lotus of creation. Chapter 408. When that time comes, Xianxia was in big trouble. Thinking about the owners of the 9 treasures of destiny, one would know how terrifying this force was. It would not be an exaggeration to say that it could overturn the primordial world. Therefore, if the creation green lotus wanted to advance into a chaos spiritual treasure, it had to be planned at length. Rumble. Not to mention how complicated Xianxia's heart was. After the birth of the green lotus of creation, the heavenly Tao rhyme came one after another and integrated into his body. At the same time, the world of everlasting joy of the eastern Jianghu also gained some benefits from this and completely evolved. The world was completely enveloped by green light, and it was dazzling and resplendent. Moreover, it was suffused with boundless vitality and emanated the aura of creation. This green light was the light of creation. The birth of the green lotus of creation had given the green lotus of creation many benefits. The transformation of endless life force into the light of creation was one of them. Following the birth of the Viridian everlasting joy realm, the nether realm underwent another change. The entire realm was filled with an aura of perfection, and the laws of heaven and earth were abnormally active. He was even more perfect. Is it done? This unforeseen event awakened Xianxia from his absent-mindedness. He looked at the green splendor world of perpetual joy once again. Who could truly control the future? It was better to grasp the present as best as possible. There was no point in thinking too much about the matter of the good fortune azure lotus. It was better to think about it when Xiao Chen became stronger in the future. Go! Putting aside his worries, Xianxia took a step forward and arrived at the Jianghu everlasting joy realm. Qing. His eyes were full of bruises. It was a boundless green. As expected of the green splendor everlasting music world, this world was green in color. Xianxia looked around and all he could see was green without any other colors. The mountains were green, the water was green, the earth was green, and even the sun was green. It was extremely miraculous. They were all formed from the aura of creation. Every blade of grass and every tree in this world had the power of creation. If placed in the outside world, they could revive the dead and regrow flesh and bones. It could be said to be extremely precious. However, in the Jianghu everlasting joy realm, it had become an ordinary item. This showed how extraordinary this realm was. 10 directions pure land. Seeing this, Xianxia thought of another name for the Jianghu everlasting music realm in the future. The 10 directions pure land. Rebirth as one wishes. This was the holy land of the mortal world after death. By coming here, one would be able to transcend. The Tai Heavenly Lord of Salvation from Misery was also known as Heavenly Lord of 10 Directions. This was where the name of the 10 Directions Pure Land came from. However, although this place was called the Pure Land, it had nothing to do with Buddhism at all. It was a proper Taoist holy land. The Buddhist Pure Land of Bliss was located in the Western Pure Land of Bliss, not in the Netherworld. Although the purpose of the two was similar, they were indeed 2 different places. As for who brought it up first, Xianxia had no idea. It was unknown whether Taoism copied Buddhism or Buddhism copied Taoism. Anyway, in the future, it was already very serious for 2 companies to plagiarize each other. Arriving at the center of the realm, Xianxia saw the 9-colored light enveloping the green lotus of good fortune. He smiled and walked up. Heavenly Tao above. Today's Xian sect's disciple, Xianxia, has established a world in the netherworld, the eastern Jianghu world of everlasting joy. I want to use this place to guide the souls of the dead to the afterlife, so that those ghosts who have no one to rely on will not suffer from hunger and cold. For those who have accumulated merit, done good deeds, understood the Tao, and achieved great merit. The poor way wants to personally guide them, ride the lotus platform of purification, scatter the auspicious light of 100 treasures, and help them ascend to immortality, attain the Tao, and transcend life and death. As soon as he finished speaking, merit descended. Bright golden light descended from the sky and completely enveloped Xianxia. It was as if he was wearing a layer of golden clothes. It was abnormally gorgeous. There wasn't much merit, not even 1,000th of the reincarnation merit. But the meaning it represented was extremely extraordinary. That heavenly Tao above opened the curtain of everything, marking the official entry of the heavenly Tao into the netherworld. Otherwise, why would the heavenly Tao bear witness to the world that belonged to the underworld? Not bad. Xianxia is indeed blessed. In the outside world, the saints saw Xianxia's performance and couldn't help but nod in satisfaction. This time, their mission was considered completed. They didn't have to worry about the punishment of the heavenly Tao anymore. It was just that they owed Hutu a favor, which was more troublesome. As for the rest, they were all within their acceptable range. However, the 6 saints were already very satisfied with this. The price they had to pay this time was much less than expected. Rumble. One could see that the power of the heavenly Tao entered the netherworld along with the power of merit and then spread to the entire world, fusing with the rules of heaven and earth. From then on, the heavenly Tao had taken root in the netherworld. Although it couldn't completely control the netherworld, it could still interfere a little. Moreover, everything that happened in this world could be investigated by it. The only thing that wasn't affected by the heavenly Tao was the 6 paths of reincarnation disc. 6 fellow Taoists. In this case, are you satisfied? After everything was settled, Hutu looked at the 6 of them and said coldly, "Fellow Taoist Hutu, please calm down." Poor Wei and the others promise that if there's nothing important in the future, they won't step into the netherworld. Since their goal had been achieved, the 6 saints' attitude towards Hutu softened as they said with a smile. In any case, it didn't mean much to them whether they came to the netherworld or not. The 6 saints wouldn't lose anything by saying some soft words to Hutu to calm her anger. Humph. In that case, then please go back, fellow Taoists. With a cold snort, Hutu sent them off. It was really infuriating to see them. Since everything was over, it was better to send them away as soon as possible so that they wouldn't be an eyesore here. Fellow Taoist Hutu, Poor Wei and the others will take their leave first. After cupping their fists, the figures of the 6 saints gradually disappeared and left this place. In fact, there was no need for Hutu to speak. They were about to leave. Did they really think that the saints wanted to come here? Here. They sensed the long-lost danger. Although it sounded unbelievable, it really happened. Therefore, if it weren't for the heavenly Tao forcing them, they would never have approached this place. This place made them uneasy, causing them to lose the ability to control everything. Fellow Taoist Hutu, after disturbing you for so long, Poor Wei and the others should leave. After the 6 saints left, the great beings also bid farewell to Hutu. This dispute, after a long time, was started by the celestial sect of wonders. After understanding all of this, these disciples of the celestial sect of wonders didn't have the face to continue staying here. They only wanted to leave as soon as possible. Sigh. This matter has nothing to do with you, fellow Taoists. After sighing, Hutu said with understanding. She knew that although these people were disciples of the celestial sect of wonders in name, that was all they could do. They couldn't be the master of any celestial sect of wonders. In the end, they have no face. Fellow Taoist Hutu, we'll go now. We'll meet again if fate allows. With a helpless smile, everyone left one after another. After this departure, I'm afraid that we won't meet again for many years. Looking at the backs of everyone leaving, not only Hutu, but even Dijun, Tai, the 6 saints, and the great beings who had been famous for a long time in the primordial world were a little absent-minded. Chapter 409. These people were all people who lived in seclusion. If nothing unexpected happened, after returning this time, they would no longer be seen in the primordial world. They would not step into the mortal world and pursue the Tao wholeheartedly. Fellow Taoists, have a safe journey. Everyone was speechless. They sent out their most sincere blessings in their hearts and watched them leave. As for Xianxia, no one paid attention to him. Poor him, he was completely forgotten. He stayed in the eastern Qinghua realm alone. Fellow Taoist, are you free now? I have something to discuss with you. After everyone left, Feng Zichen walked to Hutu's side and said softly, "What's the matter?" Hutu looked at him in surprise and asked, "It's not convenient here. Let's talk elsewhere." Looking at the sky, Feng Zichen hinted, "The sky." Frowning, Hutu looked at the sky and instantly reacted. Feng Zichen was hinting at the heavenly Tao. Then this matter was definitely not ordinary. It was an important matter. If not, why would he hide it from the heavenly Tao? All right then. Let's go to the 6 paths of reincarnation disc and talk. After thinking for a while, Hutu pointed at the 6 paths of reincarnation disc and said, the only thing she could think of that could hide from the heavenly Tao's perception, other than Pangu's Hall, was the 6 paths of reincarnation disc. Nodding, Feng Zichen expressed that he understood. Brother, I have something to discuss with fellow Taoist Feng Du. Please go to the netherworld and wait for a while. We will be back soon. Turning around, Hutu said to the group of ancestral magi apologetically, "It's fine. Sister, go ahead. We haven't had the time to take a good look at the birth of the netherworld. We can take this opportunity to walk around the netherworld. See what's the difference between it and the heaven realm." Shaking his head, Jianghu replied indifferently. What he said made sense. The netherworld was the world that Pangu had prepared for the magi. It was also one of the escape routes for the magi. Of course he had to understand it well. "Yes. Brother, I'll go first." Seeing that he was right, Hutu didn't say anything more and walked directly to the 6 paths of reincarnation. Greetings, fellow Taoist Jianghu. After greeting Jianghu, Feng Du quickly followed Hutu. Who is he? Why does he give me a familiar feeling? Could it be that I know him? Looking at Feng Du's back, Jianghu frowned. He felt that he should know Feng Du, but he couldn't remember who Feng Du was. It had to be said that Jianghu's spiritual sense was really strong. However, Feng Zichen's incarnation had undergone the baptism of reincarnation. As long as he did not take the initiative to expose himself, it would be difficult for outsiders to discover his true origin. Forget it, I won't think about it anymore. When Hutu comes back, we'll ask her directly. After thinking for a long time, Jianghu still couldn't figure it out. He simply stopped thinking about it and planned to ask Hutu directly later. After that, he brought the other ancestral magi and strolled around the netherworld. On the other side, Feng Du walked silently behind the Lady of Earth, constantly organizing his words in his heart, intending to persuade her to set up the Yin court. Now that everyone had left, it was time to bring up the matter of establishing the Yin court. Feng Du and the Lady of Earth discussed the matter of the Yin court for the time being. On the other hand, Feng Zichen had been in a state of excitement ever since he obtained the origin of the tunnel. When everything in the netherworld was over, he directly left Feng Du's incarnation to guard this place. He couldn't wait to leave this place and return to the ancestral land of the human race. He wanted to refine the origin of the tunnel. That was the great Taoist priests. Daluo Jingxian was invincible. The great Taoist priests who would become primordial Daluo Jingxian. In the primordial world, who could resist his temptation? Feng Zichen didn't know about others, but he definitely couldn't. Especially since he was only a line away from the great Taoist priests. It could be said that he was within reach. That was even more impossible to endure. After refining the origin of the tunnel in his hand, he would be the great Taoist priests. Thinking about it was really exciting. Feng Du has already bloomed the flower of the tunnel. As the original body, I can't fall behind. After teasing himself, Feng Zichen took out the origin of the tunnel and directly refined it. This origin of the tunnel was not prepared for him. Instead, it was forcefully taken by the Lady of Earth. It was not compatible with his aura. Naturally, the refinement was not as smooth as the previous two. It even caused a strong resistance from the origin of the tunnel. Boom boom boom. The true will of all things surged out from the origin of the tunnel and transformed into various forms. It contended with Feng Zichen's mana and prevented him from refining it. That wasn't all. The origin of the tunnel rumbled and resonated with the mountains, rivers, and earth. It stirred up the power of the earth and headed toward Feng Zichen. For a moment, Feng Zichen felt that his body was incomparably heavy. It was as if he was carrying an ancient divine mountain on his back. It was so heavy that he couldn't breathe. Even with Feng Zichen's cultivation, he was still pressed down. It could be seen how heavy it was. Humph. A mere origin of the tunnel actually wants to defy the heavens and escape my suppression. What a joke. Great Tao Furnace, refine for me. Feng Zichen couldn't help but be furious that he couldn't refine the origin of the tunnel. He directly summoned the Great Tao Furnace and stored it inside, using the power of the Great Tao to refine it. Compared to the power of the Great Tao, the origin of the tunnel was much weaker. Therefore, even if the power of the Great Tao possessed by the Great Tao Furnace only had a trace of the true power of the Great Tao, it was definitely not something that the origin of the tunnel could contend against. In the Great Tao Furnace, the arrogant origin of the tunnel was completely suppressed by the power of the Great Tao. Traces of the origin were refined and merged into Feng Zichen's body. However, as he watched, Feng Zichen discovered a drawback of the Great Tao Furnace. That was, there was no corresponding Tao fire. If there was a furnace, there naturally had to be a fire. Even the Grand Pure One had to use the connate 8 trigrams furnace to refine pills with the purple Tusita fire. Of course, the Great Tao Furnace also needed a matching Tao fire. In the past, when the Great Tao Furnace was still the Heaven and Earth Furnace, Feng Zichen used the fire of all creations. This was a variant of the star fire. Because the star fire was too eye-catching, Feng Zichen didn't dare to use it. He was afraid that it would attract the attention of the demons, so he changed it into the fire of all creations. Of course, the power of this fire was very powerful. It was not inferior to the 10 great primordial true fires. It was more than enough when paired with the Heaven and Earth Furnace. However, the Heaven and Earth Furnace had been upgraded and became the Great Tao Furnace. As a result, the fire of all creations was not compatible and could not fully unleash the full power of the Great Tao Furnace. This also led to the fact that although the Great Tao Furnace could suppress the origin of the tunnel, its refining speed was a little slow. Sigh. I was negligent. It wasn't too late to discover it now, but he couldn't make it in time to refine the origin of the tunnel. It took time to deduce a connate true fire. Especially the connate true fire that was suitable for the Great Tao Furnace. It was even more difficult to deduce. The Great Tao was born in the chaos, so the most suitable Great Tao Furnace was naturally the legendary Chaos True Fire. The flame that was born in the chaos was one of the most ancient flames. It could be said to be the source of fire, and its power was beyond imagination. Chapter 4:10. This kind of flame was so powerful that it could be called the most powerful flame in the primordial world. It was even stronger than the 10 great primordial true fires. It was naturally difficult to deduce and had all kinds of restrictions. To be honest, with Feng Zichen's current cultivation, the possibility of refining this flame was extremely small. If not for the chaos bead, a supreme treasure related to the origin of chaos, he would never dare to deduce the flame of chaos. Because of this, fire was not something from the primordial world, but something from the chaos. It was almost impossible for it to appear in the world. It was only because Feng Zichen had the chaos bead that he dared to have such a bold idea. Go! With a thought, Feng Zichen took out the chaos bead and took out a wisp of the origin of chaos. He activated the power of the Tao of Fire and ignited it. Immediately, the origin of chaos turned into a ball of gray flames and burned towards the Great Tao Furnace. This was the flame of chaos. It looked ordinary, but it had great power. Wherever it passed, the void was destroyed, and the laws were shattered, turning back into the state of chaos. One could see its power. At this time, although Feng Zichen had not cultivated the flame of chaos, a supreme divine power, he could still use it with the help of the chaos bead. Igniting the origin of chaos with the Tao of Fire, even if it was not the flame of chaos, it was not far away. Rumble! The flame of chaos fell into the Great Tao Furnace, and the speed of refining the origin of the Tao immediately accelerated. The connate qi in Feng Zichen's body kept jumping, as if a flower was about to bloom. However, at this moment, Feng Zichen's attention was not on the origin of the Tao at all. Instead, it was focused on the flame of chaos. Countless runes flowed in his eyes, evolving into all kinds of miraculous things. They turned into two beams of divine light and entered the flame of chaos to pry into its Tao and truth. Obviously, he planned to take this opportunity to comprehend a trace of the great Tao from this ball of flame of chaos and lay the foundation for creating the supreme flame of chaos in the future. The more powerful the divine ability, the more difficult it was to create, and the higher the realm required. Although Feng Zichen's cultivation was not high, he could accumulate his foundation in advance. When his cultivation reached a certain level, he could evolve the divine ability in one fell swoop. This was to plan for the future. Just like that, time slowly passed. Pooh! One day, Feng Zichen suddenly felt a throbbing, and hurriedly woke up from his Tao comprehension. Looking up, he saw that the Taoist flower had bloomed. 3 flowers at one's prominence and 5 qis collecting. This was the symbol of Daluo Jinxian's perfection. At this moment, Feng Zichen had finally stepped into the realm of Daluo Jinxian. Furthermore, his 3 flowers, they were different from the other 3 flowers. It was a true flower of Tao. Each flower bloomed with 12 grades, and they were all a noble purple color. They contained the power of heaven, earth, and man. Buzz, buzz, buzz. The moment the 3 flowers were formed, a certain condition seemed to have been met, and they resonated. From the unseen and untraceable place, a supreme force was directed into Feng Zichen's body. Yes. In an instant, Feng Zichen felt that he was different. It was as if he had undergone a huge change, but he could not tell exactly what the change was. Puzzled, he raised his head to take a look. Phew! What is that? When he raised his head, Feng Zichen was shocked. He saw that above the 9 heavens, a purple gold Tao wheel had suddenly appeared and was slowly rotating. So round. So perfect. Looking at the purple gold Tao wheel, Feng Zichen seemed to be shocked and could not help but praise it. That purple gold Tao wheel was too perfect. It was so perfect that nothing in this world could compare to it. It was as if everything in front of him had all kinds of flaws. That was the reason why Feng Zichen was amazed. He had seen many treasures, but none of them gave him such a perfect feeling like the Tao wheel in front of him. Even the chaos bead could not compare to it. Feng Zichen had only felt a similar feeling from Pangu. That meant that this item was infinitely close to Pangu. What was even more amazing was that there were countless runes on the Tao wheel that covered the entire wheel. It was extremely mysterious. Just looking at it would make one feel dizzy. Feng Zichen only took a slight glance and felt as if his head had exploded. Countless chaotic information filled his mind, making him feel extremely uncomfortable. He quickly closed his eyes and did not dare to look again. That was extremely unbelievable. What realm was Feng Zichen at now? Daluo Jinxian had reached perfection. It could be said to be the pinnacle of the Tao. At such a realm, what runes could he not comprehend? Even the supreme great magic, the Connate Tao scripture, and the saints' classics were placed in front of him. Although he could not comprehend it at a glance, it was not difficult to understand its meaning. But even so, the innate runes on the wheel, not to mention understanding its meaning, just looking at it made him feel confused. He did not understand its meaning at all and even felt dizzy. This meant that the level of the purple gold wheel had surpassed that of a saint. It was an endless mysterious treasure that completely exceeded Feng Zichen's understanding. That was why he could not pry into it. Outside the innate runes, there were endless rules. They were like patterns that were imprinted on the edge of the purple gold wheel. The rules of heaven and earth were extremely similar to the rules that formed the primitive world, but they were more profound. It was like their origin, making Feng Zichen unable to see through them. After looking at it for a long time, he even felt a sense of dizziness. It was even more serious than the aftereffects of looking at the innate runes just now. After a while, Feng Zichen calmed down the restlessness in his mind and continued to look at the purple gold wheel. However, with the previous lesson, he did not dare to look at the runes and rules on it again. Instead, he looked elsewhere. This time, Feng Zichen saw silk threads, countless silk threads. Those silk threads came from nowhere and stretched out from the void. They were densely packed and tightly wrapped around the wheel. And as the wheel rotated, they became tighter and tighter. These silk threads were different from the rule runes and did not have the slightest bit of magic. Feng Zichen looked at them for a long time and did not feel uncomfortable. He continued to look at them, wanting to see their origin. At first, He did not feel anything strange. But after looking at them for a long time, he did not discover their origin and found that something was wrong. It was fine that the silk threads were entangled deeper and deeper, but as the silk threads were entangled deeper and deeper with the wheel, it began to affect the speed of its rotation. It was as if there was a huge monster at the end of the silk threads that firmly held the wheel and did not let it continue to rotate. Although this effect was very small and almost undetectable, and if not for Feng Zichen's careful observation, he would not have discovered it. But it did affect the rotation of the wheel. Perhaps he could not see anything now, but as time passed, there would be more and more silk threads firmly wrapped around the wheel, bringing him great pressure. Chapter 4:11. This pressure would become stronger and stronger. First, it would continuously slow down the speed of the Tao wheel. In the end, it would even completely drag the Tao wheel, causing it to completely stop spinning and stand quietly in the void. Then, something big would happen in the primordial world. At this point, how could Feng Zichen not understand the origin of the purple gold Tao wheel? It was clearly the true ruler of the primordial world, the supreme heavenly Tao. That's right. In the primordial world, only the three Taos of heaven, earth, and man could be so magical and powerful, far surpassing the saints and directly comparable to Pangu. This purple gold Tao will existed above the 9 heavens, in the deepest part of the boundless void. Its origin was self-evident. Good boy! If the heavenly Tao stops operating, the primordial world will be exciting. I'm afraid that the primordial world will be destroyed and the immeasurable calamity will descend soon. Feng Zichen frowned and looked at the heavenly Tao. He thought with some fear. The heavenly Tao slowly rotated. It was clearly a sign of operating the world and pushing the laws. If it completely stopped, it would be terrible. There would not be a big problem in the primordial world. However, whenever the world reached the end, the heavenly Tao would be the first to sense it. It would be affected and stop operating. Therefore, if the heavenly Tao stopped operating, it would be the arrival of the immeasurable calamity and the precursor to the destruction of the world. That thread is... Looking at the thread, Feng Zichen frowned tightly. He wanted to see its origin and solve this problem for the heavenly Tao. No one could stand idly by when they saw such a major matter that concerned the survival of the primordial world. Moreover, he was a promising young man. Furthermore, he had the heavy responsibility of Pangu on him. It was even more impossible for him to ignore it. Unfortunately, even the heavenly Tao could not solve it. It was even more impossible for Feng Zichen. After looking carefully for a while, he still did not find any useful information. Connate 8 trigrams. For some reason, a thought flashed through Feng Zichen's mind. He used the supreme mystical ability passed down by Fuxi. The Connate 8 trigrams was the foundation of Fuxi's Tao. At the same time, it was also the pillar of the primordial world. Its power was naturally top-notch. Just in terms of deduction alone, the innate 8 trigrams was enough to rank in the top 3, not to mention that it had other functions. The shadow of the innate 8 trigrams appeared in Feng Zichen's eyes. Heaven and earth changed greatly, and the universe was transformed. The secrets of the threads were gradually revealed in front of him. Yes! It actually worked. The ability of the pre-celestial 8 trigrams was somewhat beyond Feng Zichen's expectations, but it made him a little excited. Originally, he only had a flash of inspiration and wanted to give it a try. He did not know whether it would succeed or not. Who would have thought that it would actually work? This was truly a huge surprise. The 3 flowers at one's prominence had caused great changes in Feng Zichen, but the specific changes were somewhat inexplicable and required him to figure it out himself. Seeing the heavenly Tao was one of them. This was the second reason why the power of the divine ability would be increased. Yes, that's right. After Feng Zichen cultivated the 3 flowers at one's prominence, the power of the divine ability had increased by an entire realm, and his understanding of the Great Path had also increased by a level. Otherwise, with his current mastery of the pre-celestial 8 trigrams, it would be impossible for him to deduce the origin of the threads. But now, he had easily done it without much effort. It had to be said that this was the benefit of forming the 3 flowers of heaven, earth, and man. Karma? That's reasonable. Withdrawing his divine ability, Feng Zichen was a little absent-minded. That thread was the thread of karma. It was the karma of all living beings that firmly entangled the heavenly path, pulling it and preventing it from continuing to operate. Sigh. This is troublesome. After understanding the origin of the threads, Feng Zichen could not help but have a headache. He had no way of dealing with this matter. Previously, he did not know the origin of the threads. Seeing that they were harmful to the heavenly path, Feng Zichen was extremely nervous and wished that he could leave and burn those threads. But now, after understanding that the threads were the threads of karma, the nervousness in Feng Zichen's heart disappeared. He was not as worried as before. He just felt that it was a little troublesome. The heavenly path would clean up the threads of karma on its own, so he did not have to worry about it. When the heavenly path felt that the existence of the threads of karma affected its operation, it would trigger the calamity of heaven and earth and clean up the primordial world. It would clean up the karma that was entangled with it in one go. This was the origin of the calamity of heaven and earth. There was too much karma accumulated between heaven and earth, and it had already hindered the operation of the heavenly path. In order to protect itself, the heavenly path triggered the calamity to clean up everything. This was completely understandable. Karma came from all living beings. This sin should naturally be borne by all living beings. Only in this way could the justice of the heavenly path be demonstrated. In fact, triggering the calamity and cleaning up the primordial world was also a method that the heavenly path had no choice but to do. If someone could clear up all the karma that was entangled in the heavenly path and let it operate steadily, there would naturally be no more calamity in the primordial world. However, that was completely impossible. The karma of a world was huge and complicated. They were connected to each other and entangled with each other. There was no clue at all. It was impossible to clear them up. Even an existence like the heavenly path that had no intelligence and was completely programmed could not be sorted out, let alone sentient beings. If not for that, the heavenly path would not have sent down a killing tribulation to clean up a portion of the living beings of the primordial world and cut off the messy karma. That was the simplest and fastest method. It would also cause the least damage to heaven and earth. However, there was no perfect method in the world. There were still loopholes in this method. Not all karma could be cut off quickly. Some karma was like poison that was attached to the bones. It was firmly entangled in the heavenly path and could not be removed no matter what. Previously, it had been said that the heavenly path could sacrifice everything for the primordial world. Among them, there was no lack of people who had contributed to the world. Not only that, those with merit would definitely be protected by the heavenly path. If these people died, it would be on the heavenly path. Even the Pangu would form karma, let alone the heavenly path. If these people died, the heavenly path would naturally be entangled in karma and could not be removed. In that case, there was quite a lot of karma on the heavenly path. It was easy to end the karma of all living beings. It was fine as long as they all died. However, how could the karma of the heavenly path be ended? Naturally, he had to let the heavenly Tao die to end everything. As time passed, the karma would accumulate and the heavenly Tao would not be able to remove it. When it could not withstand the weight of the karma, the heavenly Tao would stop operating. In that case, the immeasurable calamity would arrive. The calamity was the sin of all living beings. It was the retribution given to all living beings by the heavenly Tao. The immeasurable calamity was the sin of the heavenly Tao. It was the retribution given to the heavenly Tao by those who had died. The heavenly Tao could not withstand the weight of karma. It would naturally collapse. In that case, the world would be destroyed and all karma would be cleared. You're tuning in to the Wisdom Diary YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.